Hello, welcome to Vivi's Book Loft. Today I'm talking about my did not finish list, why I DNF books, why I rate them, and make reviews of them. So according to my story graph, I have read 248 books, the ones that I remembered to record here. 248 books in total for all time, and my DNF books are 26. Again, those that I remembered to record here. For me, I only DNF a book when it feels like a chore. When I'm forcing myself to continue on with the story. There are many reasons that I DNF a book. Sometimes it's because even though the plot or the story is very interesting, it is not executed properly. Like grammatical errors, or the plot is good, the writing is good, but the characters are flat and I just couldn't care about them. Or it could be that the writing is really good, but there's no plot, or the plot is weak and the characters are flat. So there's a lot of combinations that leads to a DNF. So I will be talking briefly about the books that are on my DNF list, and I'm just going to give a summary of why I DNF'd it, and then hopefully we'll see like a pattern or what's the common theme of me DNFing a book. So there are practices when it comes to DNFing. One group, when they do not finish a book, they do not leave a rating. Maybe they don't even leave a review. Some reviews have no rating, but they explain why they did not finish a book. And then, of course, there's the people who do not finish a book, but they leave a rating and they leave a review. I'm part of the last group. I leave a review. I do rate it. In Storygraph, you can't really rate and did not finish a book, but on Goodreads, I do leave a 1-star rating. And I explain in the review why I did not finish a book. Sometimes I stop reading a book and just remove it from my list instead of DNFing officially on my page. And those are the books that I haven't officially picked up. Like sometimes I do even get to like 10%, 15%, and it's not a book that I've decided to read and I stop. I would not DNF that officially. I would just remove it from my list. So I hope that makes sense. Let's go through my did not finish books. So the first book that I DNF'd is Night Angel Nemesis by Brent Weeks. Okay, so I started reading this book May 21, 2025, and I stopped June 9, 2025. I think I started with the text copy and then moved to audiobook. I usually move to audiobook for several reasons. For this one, specifically for Night Angel Nemesis, reading the text version felt so slow, like the pacing was so slow. So I moved to the audiobook. I played it 1.5 times faster just to get through it. But in the end, I DNF'd at 58%. So I got to 58%. I gave it a 1.5 rating. For Night Angel Nemesis, I didn't realize that it's part of a series. So it's like a spin-off series, I think. I only realized that when I checked out the Goodreads review to see what people are saying. So yeah, just a disclaimer, I have not read the original series. I just picked up this Night Angel Nemesis book. There are a lot of interesting bits in the book, like the Kakari. The opening was really good. The protagonist, Kyler, is an assassin who has a magical object that is able to cover his entire body, and that gives him special abilities. If you think of Venom, when he covers Tom Hardy's body and he gets superpowers, it's kind of like that. This magical item is like totally black. It gives him armor and weapons. I find that really cool. This magical item is semi-sentient. It's not fully an individual. It's kind of programmed to have these responses, to have a virtual personality, basically. So those are very, very interesting, and that's why I got to 58%. The plot involves Tyler, and with his magical item, he is tasked to guard 2 princes. The king is his friend, and I know now that the king was part of the cast of that original series. King asked Tyler to basically guard his heir. So there's 2 babies, but on the night that king is gone, the babies get kidnapped. His quest is now to find the 2 princes. I don't know how many pages the book is, but the audiobook is 32 hours and 11 minutes, and I got to 58%. So how many hours is that I listened to it? Let's see. Yeah, I don't know. You do the math for that. The reason I find that it was very, very, very long is the plot is not as tight as it could be, I think. There's a lot of forward movement to the plot, but it's mostly because Kyler has to go to this place to meet this person to get an information, and then he has to go to the next place to get an information and meet with this person, and then that information leads him to another place to get this item and fight this person, and then they go to the next place. So there's a lot of like moving physically. Sometimes I feel like it's not needed. Some plot points could be cut down. Because in the end, what happens is Kyler, by that time, is on board a ship because the baby is apparently in that ship. So the ship is sailing and they're basically isolated and trapped. And that's 58%. So there's another 50% that he's just there on the ship. I just think it's too long. The pacing feels so slow. And because the framing of this book is Kyler's narration is from a book that another character is reading. So there's a character who is reading a book and that book is what we are reading. That is a bit interesting. But then we get moments where Kyler addresses the reader because he's writing this book, right? He's writing his journal or whatever. So Vi can read it. But we have a lot of interjecting thoughts of him making jokes that fall flat. We have Kyler fourth wall breaking, saying like, oh, I'm not going to describe this thing because it's too gory and you're going to judge me for it. It can get a bit tiring because that repeats several times throughout the book. It's just Kyler interrupting the flow to give whatever comment he has or whatever unfunny joke he has. But for the first few times, it was fine. That gives flavor to the book, but then it repeats throughout like 58% and I just got tired of it, especially because the jokes, the commentary doesn't really evolve or it doesn't really land well. Then, of course, there is the treatment of the female characters feel weird because every time Kyler comes in contact with the female character, there's a part of it that turns sexual. For example, he meets up with another agent or something like that, and we meet this woman while she was about to be SA'd by another character. She manages to like save herself, but Kyler also got there to save her. And then as they travel, the female character somehow gets attracted to Kyler, and then Kyler starts thinking of boobs and stuff like that. And then once we get to this palace, another character comes, which is Vi, the one reading the book. Vi comes in, they have this weird tension with that other female agent, and Vi relegates the woman to be a servant because they were supposed to infiltrate this castle as noble people, nobleman, noblewoman. But then when Vi comes in, she just tells the other agent to be like, okay, you're gonna be a servant now, which is weird. There is a sudden animosity between the two female characters, and it feels like it's over Kyler. The other female agent disappears from then, and then Kyler is now working with Vi, and things turn flirty, things turn sexual as well. Like Kyler comments or thinks about Vi's boobs, which is very, very tiring to read. He's very juvenile as well because Kyler, he's in his early to mid 20s, I think, but he is an experienced assassin. But whenever he comes in contact with a female character, he just goes back to like 13-year-old boy humor or 13-year-old boy thoughts. And ultimately, that's why I did not finish. Once the female agent, Fania is her name actually, so once Fania is kicked off the mission, basically Vi comes in and then they have this sort of flirtation going on that I really do not see where it's coming from. Aside from that, Kyler is the main character and Vi is a female character. At this point, the plot is basically repeating now. Kyler gets some information, he finds out something, and it turns out the baby's not there. So he goes to another thing, and then he finds out something else, and then the baby's not there. And then eventually I just got tired of it. The audiobook is 32 hours long. I got up to 58%. I'm no longer interested in the plot. Overall, what I found not working for this book is the pacing, so it's too slow. The treatment of the female characters. Kyler breaking the fourth wall to make unfunny jokes and commentary about the Kakari, or saying things like, I'm not gonna describe this because, blah, 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 which it feels like a very, very big cop-out. He repeats that he does some violent things, and then he's gonna be like, okay, I'm not gonna tell you this because you're nasty for wanting to know the bloody details. Another part, he actually says, if I do something stupid, just assume that I had a reason for it. That seems just an excuse to him doing something out of character. I think those fall under the writing. The plot is interesting, definitely. So it's more of the writing and the characters that I have an issue with for Night Angel Nemesis. Okay, so let's move on to the next did not finish, which is Bloodguard by Cecy Rogerson. So apparently I don't have a date for starting and DNFing Bloodguard. Anyway, so basically it is a gladiator story. The main character is a gladiator, and there is a sort of fake marriage with the female main character. They have to work together so that they can get the throne, basically. When I read the summary, I thought it would be about gladiators and the social political tensions that are involved when a nation expects poor people to fight to the death in exchange for freedom and lands and a better life. What happens is, so the book opens up with a gladiator fight. They are just getting ready to go on the arena. In the first few pages, one character gets killed. Our main male character says that was his best friend. But we just started the book. These two characters barely have I think they had 2 interactions. And we're supposed to believe that the main character is in pain over it, except we barely know the characters. There's barely an introduction because the opening, they're preparing to go to arena. They go to arena, they fight, and then the main character is forced to kill his best friend. There is no tension. We don't feel the risk because we barely know the characters. So there's no emotional impact. This reminds me of a scene in Spartacus, if you guys are familiar with that. So the Spartacus and his other gladiators are forced to attend this party to be ogled and basically rented by the noble people, the noble women specifically. At this party, Spartacus and his best friend are forced to fight. It's supposed to be for entertainment, but in the end, the nobles want the fight to be to the death. I think originally it's not supposed to be to the death, but they demand blood. So in the end, the best friend tells Spartacus, like, it's okay, just do it. And then Spartacus ends up killing the best friend. Sorry, spoiler by the way. But yeah, that's what happens. This scene reminds me of that. But the difference is in Spartacus, it works because we've spent episodes watching these 2 characters build a friendship. They already fought together, they built a relationship, and then we get to this part. I think at this part, they're also already planning a rebellion or something. I don't remember. But the point is, these 2 characters have spent time on screen showing that they are friends. In Bloodguard, there's no setup to that friendship. We're just told, I think the main character says, like, among all the people, he's closest to this person. It doesn't grab you emotionally. It doesn't really work. There's no emotional attachment. There's no narrative proof. It doesn't make you believe that they're friends first before they try to do this emotional scene where he has to kill the friend. The female lead comes on screen and the male character right away focuses on her. The female main character, she's a princess, I think. She's an heir to the throne. She goes to the arena, have a special box for royalty. She goes on there, the male character sees her, and it's an insta-lust. We switch to the main female character's point of view, and we have this conversation with another female character. The female main character is supposed to be an heir to the throne. And yet, the way she handles this other female rival is very high school. It's a very Mean Girls. So basically, the main reason that I DNF'd Bloodguard is because the actual narrative does not match the synopsis. The synopsis makes you expect a grim and serious gladiator story, but the actual writing, the way the characters act, it feels immature. It just feels like they're not fleshed out well. The plot could have been interesting, but it's the writing that I have an issue with. I DNF Bloodguard at 10%, by the way, and I listened to the audiobook. The audiobook is 18 hours, 45 minutes. I'm just not interested in listening to Insta-Lust story for that long. So let's move on to the 3rd DNF here, which is A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. So I don't know when I DNF. Because it doesn't say when I started reading it, and I did not put the percentage. I picked up A Discovery of Witches because I was interested in the TV show, and I thought I wanted to read it first before watching the show. I didn't get far. The 2 characters, the main characters, have just met, and they are talking at this cafe, and there's so much detail on what the main character is eating, what she's ordering, and the book reads as just a list or a journal of what the main female character is doing. Like, she went out, she went rowing in the morning, she went jogging afterwards, people are kind of looking at her weird. She's at Oxford, she went to this party, and then the next morning, she's gonna go row again. It reads like a diary of what Diana is doing on her daily life. There's too much irrelevant details like her food order, how long she's rowing, like blah blah blah. And there's also this vibe where there's a lot of details about Oxford, like it tells you specific locations. I turn on this street under this blah 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 bridge, and it reads like the author flexing that they know Oxford on an intimate level. I just find that it distracts from what's actually important in the story, because while those details are nice and it builds the setting, there's too much focus or there's too much repetition about those little details, but the writing doesn't offer the same amount of effort, the same amount of attention to develop other parts of the story, like the characters and the dynamic between Diana and the vampire, whatever his name is. And I think the 2 main characters don't have a strong chemistry, and their banter is generic. It makes my eye roll. So for A Discovery of Witches, again, it's the writing that I had issues with, but the premise sounds interesting. Okay, let's move on to The Friendzone by Abby Jimenez. Kristen Peterson doesn't do drama, will fight to the death for her friends, and has no room in her life for guys who just don't get her. She's also keeping a big secret, facing a medically necessary procedure that will make it impossible for her to have children. Planning her best friend's wedding is bittersweet for Kristen, especially when she meets the best man, Josh Copeland. He's funny, sexy, never offended by her mile-wide streak of sarcasm, and always one chicken enchilada ahead of her hangry. Even her dog, Statman Mike, adores him. The only catch, Josh wants a big family someday. Kristen knows he'd be better off with someone else, but as their attraction grows, it's harder and harder to keep him at arm's length. The friendzone will have you laughing one moment and grabbing for tissues the next, as it tackles the realities of infertility and loss with wit, heart, and a lot of sass. So what I found interesting about this book, the reason why I picked it up, is because of this premise that the female character Kristen cannot have children while Josh wants a big family. So those are very big conversations for a couple to have, and it definitely could make or break the relationship. But I DNF this book on page 5. This is the quickest DNF that I've ever done, because the friend zone opens up with the male character whining about an ex-girlfriend to the point that he's so distracted he crashes into the car in front of him. It's a small crash, but he does rear-end the car in front of him. They pull over, and when the driver that he bumped into comes out, he immediately objectifies her. Like, she's petite, she's cute. And then after, the female character kind of leans into her car, and our male character checks out her ass. The female character kind of calls him out of it, but like, why do you feel like this is necessary? This is our introduction to the male character, and it gave me the ick right away. He goes from, complaining about the crazy ex-girlfriend to objectifying and staring at this random stranger's ass. When I read this, I asked myself, like, is this the main character? Like, is this the love interest? And I actually had to check the author again, because this feels like a male character written by a man. And I decided whether this is the love interest or not, he has a point of view in this book, and I have no desire to read whatever is in this guy's head. I do not want to know his thoughts if our first impression of him is like this. Let me just read a passage from this one, actually. "Hey," I said, getting out. "Sorry about that." She turned from her inspection and glared up at me. "Yeah, you know you have one job, right? Not to hit the car in front of you." She cocked her head. She was small, maybe 5'2", petite. A dark wet spot cascaded down the front of her shirt. Shoulder length, brown hair and brown eyes. Cute, impressive scowl. I scratched my cheek. Irritated women were a particular specialty of mine. 6 sisters. I was well trained. "Let's just have a look," I said passively, putting on my calm in a crisis voice. "See what we're dealing with." I crouched between the back of her truck and the front of mine and surveyed the damage as she stood over me, her arms crossed. I looked up at her. "I tapped your trailer hitch. Your truck is fine." Mine had a small dent, but it wasn't anything major. "I don't think we need to get our insurance companies involved. I couldn't afford to have an accident on my driving record. It wasn't good for my job." I pushed up on my knees and turned to her. She leaned over and tugged on the hitch. It didn't wiggle. "Fine," she said, obviously satisfied with my assessment. "So are we done here?" "I think we can be done." She whirled, darting around to the passenger side of her truck as I started for the grocery store. She dove into the cab, her legs dangling from the seat as she leaned in on her stomach. Her flip-flop fell off into the parking lot with a plop. She had a nice ass. "Hey," she said, twisting to look at me as I walked past. "How about instead of staring at my ass, you make yourself useful and get me some napkins?" Busted. Okay. The female character was objectified, and there's a lot of imagery and description of her being this petite, quirky. It has a bit of a sassy, manic pixie dream girl, sort of. It's like a combination of the two. But yeah, it just didn't feel great to read about that. I got the ick, and I had to double check who the author is, because yeah, it feels like a romance written by a man. That's why I DNF'd it at 5 pages. Like, again, it's the writing that I have an issue with. The plot seems interesting. I've heard about, I think it's the same book. I've heard about in the end, spoiler alert, Kristen ends up pregnant anyway. Like, she was able to get pregnant. Yeah, so that is Friendzone by Abby Jimenez. Quickest DNF ever. Let's move on to The Truth According to Ember by Danica Nova. A Chickasaw woman who can't catch a break serves up a little white lie that snowballs into much more in this witty and irresistible rom-com by debut author Danica Nova. Amber Lee Cardinal has not always been a liar, well, for anything that counted at least. But her job search is not going well, and when her resume is rejected for the 37th time, she takes matters into her own hands. She gets creative, listing her qualifications and answers the ethnicity question on applications with a lie. A half-lie, technically. No one wanted Native American Ember, but white Ember has just landed her dream accounting job on Park Avenue, Oklahoma City, that is. Account Ember thrives in corporate life, and her love life seems to be looking up to. Danua Coulson, The IT guy and fellow native who caught her eye on the first day seems to actually be interested in her too. Despite her unease over the no-dating policy at work, they start to see each other secretly, which somehow makes it even hotter. But when they're caught in a compromising position on a work trip, a scheming colleague blackmails Ember, threatening to expose their relationship. As the manipulation continues to grow, so do Ember's lies. She must make the hard decision to either stay silent or finally tell the truth, which could cost her everything. This is very, very interesting, not only because the characters are Native American. I found that the white passing is very interesting. And also we have two characters who are Native American in a rom-com. I don't see that a lot. Maybe that's on me for not broadening my reading pool. I just find it refreshing to have a rom-com about non-white characters. From the description, doesn't shy away from tackling racism as well, because Ember has to lie, do some white passing to just get this job. So obviously it won't shy away from those conversations. But yeah, it says here it's a lighthearted romance. So I was really hoping to like this book. I listened to the audiobook. It is 9 hours and 8 minutes long, so it's not too big. And I had 2 hours and 24 minutes left. So I don't know what percentage that is. You can do the math for me. DNF'd because the pacing was slow. I think the romance lacked chemistry. If the audiobook is 9 hours 8 minutes long and I had 2 hours left, so I read about like 7. I just feel like for 7 hours there's not a lot of plot that happened. There's an issue with the pacing and the character dynamic, I would say. I did not feel the chemistry at all. Like, I don't get why the characters are attracted to each other and like where the attraction comes from, aside from the physical. I only have 2 hours left, and yet I feel like the plot has gone nowhere. Oh, okay. I just found out that Danica Nova also wrote Love is a War, which is on my to-read list, so hopefully that would go better. Because yeah, Love is a War is published 2025, and then The Truth According to Ember is 2024, so maybe there's some polishing, maybe there's some improvement. Hopefully. Okay, so let's go to the next did not finish, which is Immortal Dark. Oh my god. So Immortal Dark by Tigest Girma. I listened to the audiobook, which is 16 hours and 30 minutes long. So I started reading the book sometime in June 2025, and I officially DNF'd June 22, 2025. The Cruel Prince meets Ninth House in this dangerously romantic dark academia fantasy where a lost heiress must infiltrate an arcane society and live with the vampire she suspects killed her family and kidnapped her sister. It began long before my time, but something has always hunted our family. Orphaned heiress Kidan Adane grew up from the arcane society she was born into, where human bloodlines gain power through vampire companionship. When her sister June disappears, Kidan is convinced a vampire stole her, the very vampire bound to their family, the cruel yet captivating Susenyos Sagad. To find June, Kidan must infiltrate the elite Uxley University, where students study to ensure peaceful coexistence between humans and vampires and inherit their family legacies. Kidan must survive living with Susenyos, even as he does everything he can do to drive her away. It doesn't matter that Susenyos' wickedness speaks to Kidan's own violent nature and tempts her to surrender to a life of darkness. She must find her sister and kill Susenyos at all costs. When a murder mirroring June's disappearance shakes Uxley, Kidan sinks further into the ruthless underworld of vampires, risking her very soul. There she discovers a centuries-old threat, and June could be at the center of it. To save her sister, Kidan must bring Uxley to its knees and either break free from the horrors of her own actions or embrace the dark entanglements of love and the blood it requires. I have a very, very long review about this book. The link is posted on Goodreads, also on my Storygraph. I think this is the first book that I wrote a whole essay. Well, it's not an essay, but it's several pages of review because I really wanted to love this book because there are Ethiopian vampires. It promised Ethiopian vampires, but from the part that I've read, I don't see what is Ethiopian about them. I mean, other than, they're not white. Okay, but let's start from the beginning. There are several things that I liked about this book, like the magic houses. The house that Kidan is going to inherit is a magic house in this magic society. And it seems like the house is semi-sentient. The magic interacts with the household or whoever's living there. The magic can be intimidating, the magic can be scary, but from what I understood, the magic kind of also reflects the master of the house. and that motivated me to keep listening. It's the first thing that drew me into this book. Like I mentioned a while ago, aside from the fact that the vampires are not white, like their ethnicity is not white, I don't see what is different with them compared to the traditional European white vampires. Maybe it's not supposed to be like a different kind of vampires. Maybe the book just wanted to market non-white characters as vampires without really changing the mainstream vampire lore. Maybe they just wanted to point it out that, you know, there are black vampires here. But it's weird for the marketing to be like, oh, there are Ethiopian vampires, and then they don't really do anything with it. Not in the parts that I've read anyway, but I've also heard summaries of this book, and I haven't heard anyone bring up anything new about the vampire lore. So what didn't work? Basically the writing. Plot is interesting. You do have this secret society. Kidan is supposed to master the magic of the house, and then she has to find her lost sister. She has to deal with this vampire who wants the house for himself. So there are a lot of interesting plot points that I'd want to know more about. But the writing is just flat for me. Pacing drags, and the writing is a bit, I don't know if I say contradictory, because Susenyos, the vampire, we are told that he has this really scary reputation, that, you know, he's like thirsty, dangerous vampire. But what I've seen of him, he is more reasonable than the main character. Yes, he threatens Kidan. He intentionally like intimidates her and stuff like that. But I don't see the dangerous, bloodthirsty vampire that his reputation says. There's a disconnect between what we are told and what we are shown. And then we have the flat main character. At the start of the book, Kidan already has this anger in her. She wants vengeance on Susenyos because she believes Susenyos is responsible for killing her family and kidnapping her sister. So at the very start, she is already like at this level of anger. But throughout the parts that I've read, she stays at this level of anger. There's no variation, like there's no gradual increase. The start of the character, we go from here, and as the story goes, we escalate. That's usually how it goes. For Kidan, she's at this level of anger at the start. She keeps going this way. Maybe she goes up, maybe she goes down a bit, but it's very flat. We don't see a range for her. She's just angry all the time. Vengeful protagonist is fun to read, like if they go crazy a bit, if they go bloodthirsty and crazy, that is fun. But because her anger is not really productive, it feels flat, and her anger manifests in kind of petty pranks. She and Susenyos try to make each other leave the house. Kidan does something, and then Susenyos retaliates. At one point, like I don't remember what Kidan did, but at some point she wakes up on the roof because Susenyos got back to her. The book makes you think that her vengeance is very serious, but then it feels mature. Kidan's personality seems to be like it's just one extreme to the other. Whatever emotion she feels, she's at the same level, so it makes her emotionally flat. Also, the narration, for some reason, forces Kidan to only suspect Susenyos. It doesn't even occur to her to try to investigate other characters, which I don't know if is a Kidan issue, like her as a character being very one-track minded, or because the plot needs you to suspect Susenyos. Ends up being very frustrating because it tells the reader to think this way as well. Instead of showing how Susenyos could be the only suspect, it just keeps telling you like Susenyos is a suspect until you believe it, which is leading the readers to what the plot needs. But it's not very believable because technically anyone could have done it. That society, that little university, is full of vampires. So anyone could have done it. We have cut out characters. All of the characters are flat, which I don't think I'm surprised about, because if your main characters are already flat, how could you make a more rounded NPC? So let's go to the forest, enemies to lovers. The enemies part of the dynamic feels flat, or feels, I don't want to say fake, but that word comes to mind. It doesn't feel believable because the animosity between Kidan and Susenyos comes from Kidan's belief that Susenyos got her family killed and Susenyos kidnapped June. But because the readers are not presented with proofs or presented with theories from Kidan, like as to why she blames Susenyos, the enemies falls flat. There's no foundation to it. We only have Kidan saying it has to be the family vampire, it has to be Susenyos that's responsible, but it doesn't really take time to say why. Why would it be the family vampire? She later finds out that if no one claims the house, then Susenyos, as the family vampire, gets to inherit the house. But Kidan doesn't know that until she gets to Yuxli. So what was her basis on accusing the family vampire, aside from being a vampire? You know what I mean? And then, of course, we have the pacing. The pacing is uneven. We have certain moments where they go to class where every bit is detailed, and I don't think all of it is relevant, but so much detail, so much time put on the classes. Then when we have important emotional and narrative beats to create, it zooms through that. Irrelevant things seem to get more attention compared to the parts that would build character and would move the plot forward. There is the narration itself. It's a bit flowery, which doesn't really help with the pacing. And again, it goes back to that point where there's so much detail put into one thing that ends up being not relevant. Overall, the narration has a lot of tells and no showing. Long story short, Immortal Dark was DNF'd because of the characters and the writing. The next, Your Blood, My Bones by Kelly Andrew. So I DNF'd it July 10, 2025. The audiobook is 12 hours, 7 minutes long. A seductively twisted romance about loyalty, fate, the lengths we go to hide the darkest parts of ourselves, and the people who love those parts most of all. Wyatt Westlock has one plan for the farmhouse she's just inherited: to burn it to the ground. But during her final walkthrough of her childhood home, she makes a shocking discovery in the basement. Peter, the boy she once considered her best friend, strung up in chains and left for dead. Unbeknownst to Wyatt, Peter has suffered hundreds of ritualistic deaths on her family's property. Semi-immortal, Peter never remains dead for long, but he can't really live either. Not while he's bound to the farm, locked in a cycle of grisly deaths and painful rebirths. There's only one way for him to break free. He needs to end the Westlock line. He needs to kill Wyatt. With Wyatt's parents gone, the spells protecting the property have begun to unravel, and dark ancient forces gather in the nearby forest. The only way for Wyatt to repair the woods is to work with Peter, the one person who knows how to harness her volatile magic. But how can she trust the boy who's sworn on oath to destroy her? When the past turns up to haunt them in the most unexpected way, they are forced to rely on one another to survive, or else tear each other apart. The premise is very interesting. The main character, Wyatt, finding her childhood friend chained up in the basement is very, very intriguing. I definitely wanted to know more about that, but the execution is not as I expected. So my issue about this book, why I DNF'd it, is because of the writing and the characters. Plot moves very slowly, the pacing is very slow, and I found the characters flat, because when Wyatt finds her childhood best friend strung up in her childhood home basement, her reaction was kind of lacking. Like, you would think you would have a bigger reaction, like you'd probably start cutting the chains or opening the chains, taking them down, but Wyatt does none of that. She kind of just stands there and then she leaves the room to, I think she was about to just leave the farm. She drives away, or she tries to leave the farm, but there are figures outside that trap her in, so she goes back inside and then she just stands there having flashbacks of the past, taking her time to help her childhood friend. The character's reaction doesn't make sense to me. Eventually she asks questions, and then I think Peter indirectly admits that he wants to harm Wyatt, and that's why Wyatt is reluctant to bring him down, but that's only until they got to talking. When she saw her childhood friend like that, why wasn't her reaction immediately to try to getting him down? I don't know. The way the characters talk and act is illogical for me. So there's some spooky things happening. But there's a part where a phone rings, but then the phone is not connected. Wyatt notices some things in the house. There's a wreath, or there's a plant that I think she kind of recognizes as to ward off evil spirits or something like that. And then there is a stranger who knocks at her door and she lets him in. She could have just talked to that stranger at the door, right? She didn't have to let him in or anything like that. But again, she's reacting very illogically for a person, not just as her character, but just as a person who has her childhood friend tied up in the basement, who saw some strange people or strange beings in the forest. She somehow just lets this stranger with bad vibes into her home. It doesn't make sense. So while the premise and the plot is interesting, the characters are not believable. They are contradictory, and I just didn't want to read characters like that who would endlessly frustrate me because they are acting based on what the plot needs instead of acting like characters reacting to their environments and to what is happening to them. So that was Your Blood, My Bones. The next one is Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. Isobel is an artistic prodigy with a dangerous set of clients, the sinister fair folk, immortal creatures who cannot bake bread or put a pen to paper without crumbling to dust. They crave human craft, capital C, with a terrible thirst, and Isobel's paintings are highly prized. But when she receives her first royal royal patron, Rook, the Autumn Prince, she makes a terrible mistake. She paints mortal sorrow in his eyes, a weakness that could cost him his life. Furious, Rook spirits her away to his kingdom to stand trial for her crime. But something is seriously wrong in his world, and they are attacked from every side. With Isabel and Rook depending on each other for survival, their alliance blossoms into trust, then love, and that love violates the fair folks' ruthless laws. Now both of their lives are forfeit, unless Isabel can use her skills as an artist to fight the fairy courts, because secretly her craft represents a threat to the fair folk had never faced in all the millennia of their unchanging lives. For the first time, her portraits have the power to make them feel. I officially DNF'd the book August 12, 2025. I didn't put a reason on Storygraph here, but I DNF'd it because of the pacing. I don't know what percentage I finished. I stopped before Isabel got taken to the Fae realm. I think I got to the part where she was being chased. I think the pacing was just slow. There are interesting conversations between the two characters, but because the part that I read happens in Isabel's study, isolated, or it's just contained in this one room where she paints, it felt too slow. It felt like nothing was actually happening. I mean, they're just talking and we have character work going on, but it wasn't enough to make me interested. I wasn't hooked by the actual narrative. I just slowly lost interest because I think there's not a lot of forward momentum for the plot. The next one is Enemy of My Dreams by Jenny Williamson. I DNF'd August 24, 2025. In the last days of the Roman Empire, a desperate princess and brutal Goth warlord forge a dangerous alliance. Julia, only daughter of the Emperor of Rome, lives a life of excess and freedom, wine, philosophy, and scandal. She revels in hedonism. But when her father dies and her teenage brother takes the throne, he will stop at nothing to seize control of both the empire and his wayward sister. And now Alaric of the Visigoths, a ferocious warrior who has battled Rome for years, have come to the capital to bargain for his homeland. When Julia rebels against the marriage her brother has ordered her to accept, he responds by publicly punishing her lover in the Colosseum. Realizing how perilous her position is, Julia impulsively turns to Alaric, the empire's sworn enemy, and the one man who can make Rome tremble, and engineers her own kidnapping. Julia, the Roman princess, forges an uneasy alliance with Alaric, the brutal warrior king, in an edgy, sexy cat-and-mouse game of attraction, defiance, and lust. Enemy of My Dreams is a romantic romp through the ashes of a dying empire. Alright, so the reason for me DNFing the book is because of the world building. For a book that promises an ancient Roman setting, the dialogues, speech patterns, and the idiom sound too modern. It just takes me out of immersion. There are a few inaccuracies. For example, Julia is the English version of Julia, because in ancient Rome they don't have J, they have an I.
Jehovah begins with an I. J. Oh dear. In Latin, Jehovah starts with an I.
I think that's a little thing, but it does take me out and I just couldn't immerse myself. And aside from that, we have that speech pattern, which is a bigger thing. Because if this is supposed to be ancient Rome and then suddenly a character uses modern slang or modern phrasing, modern idioms, it's not believable. It contradicts the setting of the book. I DNF it because, similar to the Bloodguard, the actual narrative doesn't match what the synopsis promised. Let's move on to The Will of the Many. At this point, I was searching for a book that is set or inspired or based on ancient Rome. So The Will of the Many by James Islington. I DNF the book August 29, 2025. Audi vide dake. The Catalan Republic hierarchy may rule the world now, but they do not know everything. I tell them my name is Wistellimus. I tell them I was orphaned after an accident 3 years ago, and that good fortune alone has led to my acceptance into their most prestigious school. I tell them that once I graduate, I will gladly join the rest of civilized society in allowing my strength and my drive and my focus, that they call will, capital W, to be leached away and added to the power of those above me, as millions already do, as all must eventually do. I tell them that I belong and they believe me, but the truth is that I have been sent to the academy to find answers, to solve a murder, to search for an ancient weapon, to uncover secrets that may tear the Republic apart, and that I will never ever cede my will to the empire that executed my family. To survive, though, I will still have to rise through the academy's ranks. I will have to smile and make friends and pretend to be one of them and win, because if I cannot, then those who want to control me, who know my real name, will no longer have any use for me. And if the hierarchy finds out who I truly am, they will kill me. So I DNF'd 8%. Basically, it's the writing. The book right away introduces a lot of information. There is a page dedicated to the hierarchy hierarchy. These people get this much will, and this kind of people get higher amount of will. There are eight hierarchies, and it lists how many wills each category gets, and it just puts that on a page. It doesn't really explain what will, capital W, is. Chapter 1 introduces a lot of concepts which are not explained either by exposition or by context clues. Generally, I'm not a fan of doing world building via exposition, but that would be better than just nothing at all. In the first few chapters, it's poorly explained or poorly demonstrated. I don't get what the will is. I don't get how each category of people get the will. There are terms that seem to expect readers to know what it means by context, but again, it's not really explained in the context. You kind of know the gist, but logistics, the details, you don't know. So you don't really know what's it about. And there are Latin words sprinkled throughout that is far from the original meaning in Latin. So yeah, I don't know like if the Latin words are used properly or not, but it just feels, I'm not saying that it's wrong, like I'm not an expert in Latin. I took some classes, but I'm not an expert in Latin. But there are some words that are used that seem disconnected from the source language, from its original Latin meaning. I read the text copy and I was just wondering how they pronounce the character's name, how they pronounce the V. Because a lot of times, movies, TV shows, they pronounce the V as the modern V, like victory. When the actual ancient Roman Latin, the V is pronounced as a W, like a W. So the character, his name is spelled as Vis. So I was just wondering, like in the audiobook, if they actually do Vis or they do Wis. Anyway, let's move on. To summarize, the chapter 1 failed to hook me. Doesn't seem as interesting as the synopsis, which I think that would be a writing issue, because technically the first sentence of any book is supposed to hook readers in. It's supposed to create questions, it's supposed to establish tension, it's supposed to hint at what this story is about. But for the first chapter of this book, it's not even just one paragraph, one line, it's the whole chapter. Didn't really make me want to read more. It didn't hook me. I would consider that a writing technicality failure. I might try reading it again, maybe try the audiobook. I don't know yet, but right now it's a DNF. Let's go to Babel by R.F. Kuang. Okay, so I know this is a very popular book. I tried Babel and I tried Katabasis as well. I'm not gonna call it Katabasis because Katabasis flows better. But yeah, I tried both books and I found out that R.F. Kuang's writing is not for me. And that's the reason why I DNF'd Babel, because of the writing. Okay, let's go through the description first. Traditore. An act of translation is always an act of betrayal. 1828, Robin Swift, orphaned by cholera in Canton, is brought to London by the mysterious Professor Lovell. There, he trains for years in Latin, ancient Greek, and Chinese, all in preparation for the day he'll enroll in Oxford University's prestigious Royal Institute of Translation, also known as Babel. Babel is the world's center for translation and, more importantly, magic. Silverworking, the art of manifesting the meaning lost in translation using enchanted silver bars, has made the British unparalleled in power, as its knowledge serves the Empire's quest for colonization. For Robin, Oxford is a utopia dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge. But knowledge obeys power, and as a Chinese boy raised in Britain, Robin realizes serving Babel means betraying his motherland. As his studies progress, Robin finds himself caught between Babel and the shadowy Hermes Society, an organization dedicated to stopping imperial expansion. When Britain pursues an unjust war with China over silver and opium, Robin must decide, can powerful institutions be changed from within, or does revolution always require violence? So there are a couple of interesting things in the synopsis. There is, of course, the discussion of the colonization. The question at the end sets up what the theme of the story is. Can powerful institutions be changed from within, or does revolution always require violence? So basically the theme of the story is if violence is necessary for rebellion, which is interesting. But a DNF, that's 7%. The audiobook is 21 hours and 46 minutes long. It's too monotonous, and I can't read the whole 22 hours if it's just one note all throughout. I don't usually read author's note. If I'm reading a physical copy or a digital copy, I skip that part unless there is a research details, kind of like Mimi Matthews. She adds notes at the end of her book, which I find interesting to read. But if it's like author's note where they tell their inspiration or something like that, I don't really read it. But for this, because I was reading the audiobook and doing errands while reading it, I listened to the author's note, and right away it did not give me a good vibe. The author's note sounded so defensive, but at the same time sort of bragging, because R.F. Kuang justifies the oyster or something like that. she justifies putting oysters, or like the characters eating oysters in Oxford. And just like, oysters weren't there at the time, but it was an experience for me, so I added it there. I don't know, it's just weird. It's just super weird. This is a historical fantasy. The author already changed the source of the British Empire's powers. Instead of the Industrial Revolution, you have silver working. For her to then defend herself, saying like, I know oysters weren't a thing in Oxford at that time, but I want to add it because it was an experience for me. It's like she is preparing herself for the backlash regarding the oysters. But at the same time, would readers even clock that? Would they even get their pitchforks just because oysters were there? It ends up feeling like the author just defending her knowledge of Oxford. I only tried 2 books, okay? But I have seen book reviews to say that R.F. Kuang has this chip on her shoulder about academia, that she has commentary on how toxic it is, which I find kind of ironic because judging from her author's note and from Babel and Katabasis, while she may be writing or making commentaries about how toxic academia is, she seems to still flex her time at Oxford. She seems proud to have this intimate knowledge of Oxford and maybe other schools like Cambridge, I think. I don't know, I just find it contradictory or ironic that academia is toxic, but at the same time, she really holds her time in Oxford and Cambridge or whatever in a really high regard. Like, she's really proud that she knows Oxford so intimately because she was there. I'm saying this just by interpreting the author's note and what she writes about. It comes off as half defensive, half pretentious, and it did not make me excited to actually read the book. Anyway, let's get to the actual review of the book. So Babel's narration and the dialogue and literally just the writing is too long and too bland. So there's a lot of details, descriptions that are irrelevant. They do not show character, they don't move the plot forward, or they don't even add flavor to the setting. There's a lot of name droppings or like mentioning events, people that are contemporary to, what's the year? That are contemporary to 18-something London. And instead of, building this world, introducing this world, it just reads as the author showing off the research that she did to write this book. The descriptions of the locations, the people, whatever events are happening in that time doesn't feel integrated to the story. It just feels like an exposition, a showing off of what the author knows. There is a part where Robin was eating bread and then he goes off this tangent about Plato's form theory, which I find very random and very pretentious. At this point, Robin is a kid. He landed in London and he's still young, and he goes off about this form theory for no reason, just eating bread, which again sounds pretentious, like the author just dropping her knowledge and just using the character as a mouthpiece to deliver that knowledge. It doesn't seem true to Robin's character to eat bread and then think of Plato's form theory because he's young. He's there to study translation. He's there to study languages. So why is he going off about Plato's form theory? I know, it just feels very jarring. It is out of the blue, and like with the world building, it just feels like the author showing off her knowledge. And the writing also doesn't have a good balance of narration, action, dialogue, and exposition. It feels like the whole book or the whole part that I've read is very heavy on the exposition. It just drops names, events, philosophical ideas randomly that doesn't, show character or move the plot forward. And then the dialogues that we have are not character specific, meaning that they don't reflect the characters who are talking. Everyone seems to talk the same way. And then of course there is a lot of telling as well instead of showing. And the way the narration goes as well is very monotonous because it's exposition after exposition or explanations of things. There's no room for emotional beats. Like Robin is taken from his homeland and brought to London by a stranger. The professor is basically a stranger to him. But there's no sense of wonder. There's no sense of fear about being in a different place, being surrounded by strangers. There's no wonder about the new surroundings, about whatever new thing he's seeing in London. It's all presented to the readers as like, he saw this, he did that, London is big, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't have enough emotion to it. Yeah, so it doesn't express the wonder or overwhelming feelings Robin might have had from being exposed to different culture for the first time. The emotional flatness doesn't give a sense of character for either the setting or the protagonist. And the characters fall flat as well. They come off as the author's mouthpiece instead of individual people having their own lives, reacting to their environment and to the people around them. There's a comment that I think Robin makes about preferring Mary Shelley over her husband's work because her husband is like over dramatic. Like, while the book forms it as Robin's opinion, it reads as R.F. Kuang's opinion, because at this point I don't know Robin's personality, because we spent the time just telling us, okay, Robin saw this, Robin learned this, but I don't have a good basis of Robin's character. He feels flat. So when there's this, very strong opinion, it just reads as R.F. Kuang using Robin to express her opinion, which I'm not saying this is R.F. Kuang's opinion. I don't know her opinion. I don't know anything about her, but from what I'm reading, it feels like the author's opinion instead of the character's opinion, because I don't believe that Robin would think this way, because I don't know what Robin's personality is. This opinion that Mary Shelley was better feels more aligned to R.F. Kuang than to Robin. Ultimately though, it's the annotations that made me finally stop reading the book or stop listening to the audiobook, because the audiobook has two narrators, one for the text itself, it's a male narrator for the text itself, and the female narrator for the annotations. How the audiobook worked that is, you have the male narrator reading the actual text, and then if there's an annotation, the female voice jumps in to read the annotation, and then it goes back to the male voice. And it's just so distracting, because we have, for example, there's a part where it says, where was Antica and why was Sir Thomas Bertram always going there? And then the female voice interjects, because he owned slaves. It's so distracting, especially for this example of annotation. The because he owns slaves part is so unnecessary. Like, why not integrate that information into the text itself? Why drop this? Like, where was Antica and why was Sir Thomas Bertram always going there? Why was that added with an annotation? Why not just put the information with the exposition? It just feels very clumsy to me, because this is supposed to be prose fiction. It is not a research paper. So if you need to write so many annotations, I just feel like that's just bad prose fiction writing. Because if you need annotations, because presumably you put annotations to add information that you find necessary. Because if it's not necessary, you wouldn't even bother to put annotations. So why not just integrate those informations in the annotations within the text, if you are so reluctant to remove it completely that you have to put annotations? Kind of like DLCs. DLCs that tie in to the next installment of the game. For example, Dragon Age Inquisition, it has the Trespasser DLC. The Trespasser DLC is such a big plot point to the story, and it doesn't make sense that they put it in DLC. So why not just put that in the main game? Similar thing here. Why would you delegate some information to annotations if you think it's important for readers to know? Why not put them in the text itself? Why not integrate it instead of interrupting your own story? And some annotations are not even important, kind of like this one. It feels just like R.F. Kuang showing off all her knowledge in this book, like all the research that she did for this book. Like I wrote on my review, instead of the author using her research as a strong foundation for world building, she used it to paint every wall, floor, and ceiling with neon colors. Okay, so overall, exposition drags, derails the plot, the narration is so dry, it's monotonous, the narration comes off as pretentious and condescending, especially with the notations and stuff like that. It's very unnecessary, it's very distracting. Characters come off as flat, they feel like mouthpieces for the author's message. So that's why I DNF'd it. Let's move on to Arcana Academy by Elise Kova. I DNF'd September 29, 2025. So Elise Kova, I've already read or listened to 4 of her books, Married to Magic series. I listened to the graphic audio versions and I really enjoyed them. I enjoyed the world that she built. I liked the characters and the romance were compelling for all books. So when I found out that she has the Arcana Academy, I wanted to read it. A woman who wields magic tarot cards lands herself in a false engagement with the headmaster of a mysterious academy in this first installment of an enthralling fantasy romance series from the best-selling author of A Deal with the Elf King. Clara Grayson has survived the underworld of Eclipse City through thievery, luck, and a whole lot of illegal magic. After a job gone awry, Clara is sentenced to a lifetime in prison for inking tarot cards, a rare power reserved for practitioners at an elite Arcana Academy. Just when it seems her luck has run dry, the Academy's enigmatic headmaster, Prince Kalis, offers her an escape for a price. Kalis believes that Clara is the perfect tool to help him steal a tarot card from the king and use it to recreate an all-powerful card long lost to time. In order to conceal her identity and keep her close, Kalis brings Clara to Arcana Academy, introducing her as the newest first-year student and his bride-to-be. Thrust into a world of arcane magic and royal intrigue, where one misstep will send her back to prison or worse, Clara finds that the prince she swore to hate may not be what he seems. But can she risk giving him power over the world and her heart, or will she take it for herself? I really want wanted to enjoy this book because I enjoyed Elise Kova's other works, but I got to page 193, 34%, somewhere around 34%. Protagonist, basically her goal for going to the school is she wants to find her sister, which sounds familiar. The book opens with her escaping the prison, only for the prince to catch up to her and force her to go to the school. The premise is very interesting, especially with the tarot magic. If you look over there, maybe you can see it, I do have some collection of tarot cards, so I have a casual interest in tarot. I'm not a reader myself, but I am kind of learning. I know a few stuff, and I like to listen to those pick a card reading on YouTube. I just find them interesting. Yeah, the premise is very interesting to me, but when I actually read it, the opening is very good. Then when the actual school starts, there's a lot of world building that I find is clunkily done. In the beginning chapters for Arcana Academy, there's just a lot of information that is presented to you as exposition. There's a lot of terms, for example, houses, clans, or suits, or whatever. There's a lot of that, and it doesn't really integrate it well with the plot, so I don't really think it's explained enough in the exposition. What does it mean? How is it important to the world building, to the story, to the characters? There's just a lot of information given. I've also noticed that in some of the reviews, those who are not that familiar with tarot are kind of confused. I don't think the book explains it to the readers who do not know anything about tarot cards, so it gets heavy real quick. We also have a lot of supporting characters like the classmates. It's hard to differentiate the characters because they are introduced all at the same time at this entrance ceremonies, and they tell you their name, this is the house they're in, this is blah blah blah, but their personalities are not different to each other. I could not differentiate one character from the other, let alone memorize their names. So it's just a lot of nouns and terms in a short amount of time instead of creating that world building little by little. However, the main thing that made me DNF Arcana Academy is the romance. It's weird because it does play into enemies to lovers trope, but at the same time there's also insta-lust. Every interaction between the main character and the love interest, so it's Kaylis and Clara, every interaction they have is like Kaylis comes in, threatens Clara a bit, there's some tension, Clara says this is the worst person, blah blah blah, but then we also get descriptions of he's handsome and things like that. It's a contradictory mix of enemies to lovers and insta-lust. The banter is not even witty. It's not enjoyable. It's the usual generic enemies to lovers banter. For this character, for Kaylis, he is the headmaster of this place, but he's 23 or something, which is very unbelievable. He's a prince. He is the headmaster, and he's a general of the nation or something like that. And he's 23, early 20s. Very unbelievable. He is said to have a reputation as well, but we don't really see that. We don't really see him being powerful as the narration tells us he is. So for short, Arcana Academy, I DNF'd it because of the characters and the world building. For the Arcana Academy, I started with the text copy and then I moved to the audiobook. The audiobook is 20 hours and 27 minutes. I DNF at 23%. I'm disappointed about this book because, like I said, I liked the author's Married to Magic series. That series, it has a certain charm to it. There's a fairy tale vibe and there's a sense of wonder and mystery because the main character is transported or taken to a different realm. For this one, it doesn't have the same charm. The characters don't have that same chemistry compared to the characters in Married to Magic series. I was so surprised. How come this book reads so differently than the Married to Magic series? But at the same time, I know that I read or I listened to the graphic audio versions of the Married to Magic series. Could it be that the performance of the voice actors for the graphic audio version improved the writing, or is the writing in Arcana Academy just really different from the writing in the other series? Another note regarding the characters, the main character, Clara, she is there to find her sister, and she is roped into this fake engagement to Kaylis. But there is a repetitive cycle that happens between the two characters, which is, Kaylis comes in, they argue about something, Clara calls him arrogant and repulsive, yada yada. Kaylis reminds her that they have a deal. He can get Clara into a lot of trouble. And then Clara says, oh yeah, I need to follow whatever he says. I only got to 23%, but this cycle happened maybe 3 times already. So it was just getting repetitive without adding more nuance, without adding character development. I noticed there's a lot of DNFs in a couple of months in a row. This is because I had a lot of held books on Libby, and they happened to be available roughly at the same time. So I just tried to read them one after the other. But once I DNF a book, I tried different books. There are also other books that I read around at the same time. Usually I read one text and then one audiobook, just so if I'm driving or if my eyes are occupied, then I can read the audiobook, and then if I have time, I read the text copy, which is my preferred mode. I do like reading the text copy more because I found out that the delivery of the audiobooks, like the narrators, affects my reading. Sometimes I just don't like a narrator's rhythm or how they pace the words, and it throws me off, so I still do prefer the text. Audiobook is just so much more convenient when you can't keep your eyes in one place. The next one is Where the Dark Stands Still by A.B. Poranak. I DNF'd October 3, 2025. So the premise is very interesting. This is why I picked it up. A girl with dangerous magic makes a risky bargain with a demon to be free of her monstrous power in this young adult fantasy, perfect for fans of An Enchantment of Ravens and House of Salt and Sorrows. Liska knows that magic is monstrous and its practitioners are monsters. She has done everything possible to suppress her own magic to disastrous consequences. Desperate to be free of it, Liska flees her small village and delves into the dangerous demon-inhabited spirit wood to steal a mythical fern flower. If she plucks it, she can use its one wish to banish her powers. Everyone who has sought the fern flower has fallen prey to unknown horrors. So when Liska is caught by the demon warden of the wood, called the Lezi, a bargain seems better than death. 1 year of servitude in exchange for the fern flower and its wish. Whisked away to the Lezi's crumbling manor, Liska soon makes an unsettling discovery. She is not the first person to strike this bargain, and all her predecessors have mysteriously vanished. If Liska wants to survive the year and return home, she must unravel the taciturn host's spool of secrets and force the ghost, figurative and literal, of his past. Because something wakes in the woods, something deadly and without mercy. It frightens even the Lezi and cannot be defeated unless Liska embraces the monster she's always feared becoming. It definitely has a very interesting premise. I always like bargain stories, like bargaining with demons or bargaining with whatever supernatural creatures. I enjoy that kind of story. So that's why I picked this up. It also has a fairy tale vibe. But I DNF'd at 22% because of the writing style. I found the writing style passive. It frequently goes to long flashbacks, which interrupts the flow of the current day. It doesn't allow whatever's happening in the present to build tension because it interrupts that, and then it goes back to time where it's usually the main character, Liska, reminiscing about her childhood, kind of like, when I was a child, this spirit house came in, blah, 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 that kind of thing. So it interrupts the tension and the flow of the present action. The pacing is slow as well, and the tone is a bit monotonous. There are some descriptions that I don't think fits the tone or the pace. For example, she's running from something. There are too many descriptions and some filler words that slow down the flow of the sentences, which makes the pacing slow, which doesn't give a sense of urgency. The character feels flat. Some of her reasonings basically can be summed up to, sure, why not? That's the energy that she's giving. There is no deliberate action from her. It doesn't feel like she is active in her own story. Same with the male main character. He comes in and out of the narrative randomly, depending on when a mystery needs to be delayed or something needs to be revealed. Like, if the plot needs to move forward, then the main male character appears and gives information, interacts with the main character. And then once that's done, he just kind of leaves to do whatever. There is no clear personality or clear motivations with him. There is a bit of a mystery about the past bargains that he made, which was one of the things that I was interested in. But because this mystery is kind of drawn out, there's no breadcrumbs, I lost interest really quickly. So overall, a lot of interesting things, a lot of interesting ideas here, like the house spirits and the woods, the mysterious bargain, all had a potential. It's just the numerous flashbacks just interrupts the flow, and I just got tired of going back and forth between present and past. But ultimately, I decided to not finish because there's a lot of tells instead of showing. The flashbacks, and they're all mostly telling and not showing. It just became boring to read. Like, I was not hooked. Okay, so next one is Godkiller by Hanna Kraner. I started with the text version, the digital version, but then I moved to the audiobook version, which is 12 hours 54 minutes, DNF on October 17, 2025. So Godkiller follows the character who had been wronged by the gods. Her family was basically kind of abandoned by the god who favored them before, and her family died, and now it's only Kisin that survived. The premise is really good. If there's a character who's out there killing gods, then I would always be interested in it. But I stopped reading or listening when the third POV character came on. The chapter started really, really strong. It opens when the villagers attacked Kissin's family. They basically dragged them out of their house and burned them because they follow the fire god now. They used to follow the ocean god, and the ocean god favors Kissin's family because the ocean god and Kissin's dad were lovers. The next chapter, the following chapters, Kissin is now an adult. She goes around killing gods, basically. She is looking for this minor god that I don't remember what god it was, but Kissin was destroying the shrine. She is successful in killing the god, and then she proceeds to this village where there's a heavy-handed descriptions of her flirting with a woman. It feels a bit weird how heavy-handed the flirting with the woman was. I don't know. Maybe that's just a me thing. So the main reason that I DNF the book is despite the strong start, despite the very strong backstory for Kissin, as an adult, she just becomes a stereotypical, cynical, bounty hunter rogue type character. She has such a good backstory, but then it doesn't really reflect her character now. She's just this angry, vengeful mercenary who hates the gods because of what happened to her family. So all the nuance from her family being favored by the ocean god. Oh, her dad also sacrificed himself and prayed to the ocean god to save Kissin. So that's a very interesting dynamic. That would create a very interesting, very specific trauma with her. But yeah, from what I've read, she just comes off as a stereotypical vengeful, down on her luck character. We have the second point of view, which is a kid who has a demon attached to her. That is very interesting, and she looks for Kissin to ask her for help. The idea between the kid having a god attached to her is very interesting, but at the same time, I don't know, there's just something missing that fails to hook me. And then when the third POV character came in, I believe it was a knight or something like that, I just lost interest because the first two characters, Kissin had a good start, but then kind of gradually lost interest. And then there's another character who is a bit interesting, but still failed to hook me. And now we have a third character. There's too much switching between the POVs that I didn't have enough time to get interested in one character. And then the POV introduces another character. And then before I get interested in that character, it switched to another POV. The changing of the POVs did not give me enough time to get invested with the character. I just don't care about what happens to any of them. And that's why I did not finish. The audiobook was also hard to listen to because the narrator sounds like she's out of breath all the time.
Born on the love of the sea. O citizen filled their nets with fish, taught them when to ride a storm and when to hide, and brought them safe home with their catch each day. Kissin and her family grew up in the sea's favor. But the sea god didn't bring fortune to the lands of Talisha. Eventually, the villagers on the hills were enticed by a god of fire, Heseth, and her promises of riches. Everyone wanted the wealth of the fire lovers. In Heseth's name, the Talishans burned their boats' outer edges. The waves crashed outside, and the smoke stirred as some sea wind forced its way through the cracks in the wattled walls. She felt a fresh bite of...
I thought that the narration was like this just for the prologue, but no, that's the cadence, that's the pacing, that's the rhythm of the audiobook throughout. It's just hard to listen to because it feels like I can't breathe because of the breath intake. Okay, so the next is This Woven Kingdom by Tahereh Mafi. I DNF October 28, 2025. I read the digital version. Clashing empires, forbidden romance, and a long-forgotten queen destined to save her people. Best-selling author Tahereh Mafi's first in an epic romantic trilogy inspired by Persian mythology. So the main draw for me, the reason I picked up this book is because of the Persian mythology. I think it's always good to branch out of the usual Tolkien-esque fantasy. To all the world, Elise is a disposable servant, not the long-lost heir to an ancient Jinn kingdom forced to hide in plain sight. That's kind of on the nose, isn't it? The crown prince, Kamran, has heard the prophecies foretelling the death of his king, but he could never have imagined that the servant girl with the strange eyes, the girl he can't put out of his mind, would one day soon uproot his kingdom and the world. Perfect for fans of Le Bardugo, Tomi Adeyemi, and Sabah Tahir, this is the explosive first book in a new fantasy trilogy from the New York Times bestselling and National Book Award nominated author Tahereh Mafi. So I DNF at chapter 5. The book does a really interesting creation lore. Like, there's the lore more about the devil and the jinn. So basically, from what I understand, the jinns all live in this world, but then one jinn, I don't remember if he betrayed the others or he did something against the jinn society, and that's how the devil was created. The whole jinn society was punished by the cosmos. Like, there was a prolonged ice age that basically killed a lot of them. Until now, they're kind of still recovering from that punishment. I think it was very interesting lore tying a devil archetype to this fallen jinn. The main reason that I DNF it is because, again, the writing. I felt like the writing was trying too hard to sound smart and elegant, but all it did was use the thesaurus to swap out synonyms. What could have been a simple, straightforward idea becomes convoluted and slows down the plot because we're using a very strange way to express a simple idea. The dialogue tries to be snappy and witty. It tries to do that funny, quick banter, but it falls flat and feels pretentious because of the phrasing. Each sentence goes way too long. Being snappy and witty, it uses fewer words, but has a lot of impact. But here, the characters use this sort of old style way of talking where it's very indirect. It doesn't really work. And it does this without even showing insight to the characters' personalities because it's not flavored by the characters' personalities. The dialogue also gives mixed signals regarding the dynamic and relationship between Kamran and Hazan. I don't understand if they're close enough for Hazan to make jabs at the prince, or is Hazan just that bold to poke and prod his prince, or does Kamran not care, or is Kamran allowing Hazan to tease him because they are friends? I couldn't figure out their dynamic because it could be either or. It's just a mixed signals of how their dynamic is. There's also a lot of telling and not showing. There's no subtext to allow the readers to get a deeper engagement with the characters. I'm just going to read a passage here from the book. It says, "It was a shame then that Kamran did not dissect himself. He did not stare out of windows, wondering what other emotions might be lurking beneath the veneer of his ever-present anger. It did not occur to him that he might be experiencing a muddied sort of grief, so it did not strike him as unusual that he was fantasizing just then about driving a sword through a man's heart." So that's a very convoluted way to show that Kamran doesn't self-reflect and that his first reaction to any deeper emotions that he might be feeling, like grief, is violence. Like, this is such a roundabout, bland, confusing way. And it's just telling. It did not occur to him that he might be experiencing a muddied sort of grief. It's such an interesting internal conflict for Kamran as a character, but the way it's presented is just so bland and uninteresting because it just tells you there's no subtext. Instead of the readers kind of getting to know Kamran slowly, figuring out what makes him tick, we are told in his first point of view. So the sentence that made me DNF the book is Hazan prevaricated. It took me out so much because why not just say he evaded the question? Or why not say he didn't answer, he turned away, or he turned his back to whoever he was talking to? No, it has to be he prevaricated. It just feels like the author was going through the thesaurus to look for a word that sounds profound. This book is doing a lot of telling instead of showing anyway, so why make the telling even more convoluted? I think it would have worked better if it just straightforward said Hassan evaded the question, if you're not going to show it anyway. Prevaricated.
Blood orange is so pretentious. Shut up, it's red.
It's such an uncommon word that it just took me out and couldn't continue reading anymore. Yeah, so for The Woven Kingdom, the premise is interesting, but the characters and the writing is, to me, not good. Let's get to the next one. Feybound by Sarah El-Arifi. I DNF'd it October 28, 2025. Two elven sisters become imprisoned in the intoxicating world of the Fae, where danger and love lie in wait. Feybound is the first book in an enchanting new trilogy from Sunny Times bestselling author of The Final Strike. Yiran was born on the battlefield, has lived on the battlefield, and one day she knows she'll die on the battlefield. As a warrior in the elven army, Yiran has known nothing but violence her whole life. Her sister, Lettel, is trying to make a living as a diviner, seeking prophecies of a better future. When a fatal mistake leads to Yiran's exile from the elven lands, both sisters are forced into the terrifying wilderness beyond their borders. There, they encounter the impossible, the Fae court. The Fae haven't been seen for a millennium, but now Yiran and Lettel are thrust into their seductive world, torn among their loyalties to each other, their elven homeland, and their hearts. It is an interesting premise. I do like the idea of this story with elven sisters. It also has lesbian representation, so that's good. The reason that I DNF this, though, is because I couldn't get into the story. The characters didn't hook me exactly, and the world building seems lacking. Like, for example, at the beginning, there is this talk about drum magic. So the main character, her weapon is a drum. And then she's able to make magic by playing the drum, which I don't understand. And it doesn't even explain, either by exposition or by context clues, how the magic works. The drum is made by the skin of some special animal as well. So there's something about the material that gives the magic. But like, I don't get how playing the drum would then create this and that effect. My mind just got stuck on that even as I was reading on, and I just got too distracted with it to continue. Maybe I'll try reading it again, or maybe listening to the audiobook, I don't know. But this is why I DNF that. I was not hooked by the characters or the world building. Let's go next to Blood and Steel by Helen Schuer. I DNF that November 3, 2025. So I listened to the audiobook, which is 14 hours and 52 minutes. I DNF'd at 9%. Perfect for fans of the British Kingdom from Blood and Ash and The Witcher. Blood and Steel is an epic romantic fantasy with enemies to lovers, slow burn spice, found family, and a sprawling world of magic and monsters. Okay, from that alone, there are a couple of things that made me interested in the book. There's enemies to lovers, slow burn spice, found family. I do like all those three tropes, given that it's done well. And it also compares itself to Blood and Ash and The Witcher, which are two series that I follow. So yeah, it got me interested. With her death foretold, Althea Zoltaire only has 3 years to become what she's always dreamed of being, a warrior legend. Women are forbidden to wield blades, so she has trained in secret her entire life. Now racing against the clock, she fights to secure her place in the elite guard charged with the protection of the 5 kingdoms. The sparring and hazing of the new trainees border on deadly, but even more dangerous is her growing attraction to Wilder Hawthorne, her unwilling warrior chaperone. All around them, schemes are afoot and darkness looms. Will Althea pass the perilous initiation test and take her place as a champion of Thesmar, or will the invading evil snatch away her dream before it starts? Blood and Steel is the gripping first book of the heart-pounding epic romantic fantasy series The Legends of Thesmar. Okay, at 9%, we have the first interaction between the two characters. I'll just remind you that this is a book that is marketed as a slow burn spice enemies to lovers, okay? Just from their first interaction, we get lines like, "Something about him heated her blood," and "as if he knew her body's treacherous response to him." At 9%. So the synopsis lied. It's not slow burn because we're getting insta lust. That is framed as the, oh no, why am I feeling this way? I shouldn't be feeling this way type of dynamic. It's still insta lust though. So in the book, it says that there is a prophecy, and after the prophecy was known, they confiscated all the weapons of the female warriors. Some of them, instead of giving up their weapons, they left. I was interested in knowing more about that, because surely that would bite somebody in the ass at one point. But I couldn't even get to that part because the writing feels immature. It feels generic. We have the, oh no, why am I feeling this way? I shouldn't feel this way, which is overdone. And the characters don't feel mature enough. Like, the female character is supposed to be 24, but she is written as immature, and she feels like she has the not like other girls vibe. She's quirky, she's reckless and thoughtless. The backstory of the main character knowing she's about to die in 3 years is interesting, but I don't feel like it played a part to her personality. The dialogues don't feel genuine to the character. The dynamic with the two characters, it feels generic. Like, you know how enemies to lovers banter is, that back and forth fighting for whatever reason. Usually it's a petty reason. It's kind of like that, and the dialogues are trying to be quotable, just being words spoken by individuals. Their speech pattern also sounds modern at times, which ruins the immersion. I think overall what really made me DNF this is the Instalast. I am just so tired of Instalast, especially for a book that is marketed specifically as enemies to lovers, slow burn spice. Let's go to the next one, which is I Bet You'd Look Good in a Coffin by Katie Brent. So this is like a funny murder story. So the protagonist, Kitty Collins, is a serial killer. I think this is the second book. Yeah, this is the second book. I did not realize it was a second book until I've already listened to a part of it. But in the book one, she killed people, and at the end, she kind of promised herself not to do that anymore. And that's where book 2 comes in. So she's a reformed serial killer, but then she's thinking of going back to serial killing. My name is Kitty Collins, and I'm a serial killer. I don't want to kill. It's just so hard to resist. Some men really, really deserve it. Men like Blaze Bundy, an anonymous influencer spreading misogyny online. He's making it very hard for me to control my murderous urges. Meanwhile, I'm in the south of France to watch my mother marry a man I've never met. I should be drinking cocktails and focusing on my tan, not plotting a murder. But a woman's work is never done. Surely one more teensy tiny kill wouldn't hurt, would it? I DNF this November 3, 2025, and I stopped at 11%. This is very interesting. A serial killer protagonist, and it's framed as a cozy murder story, or it has that humor, right? But in actuality, the book is full of shallow characters, repetitive narration, and boring dialogue that doesn't show the character's personality. There is a lot of name dropping of brands. You know how in TV shows where this group of white women go out for brunch and they talk about like this fancy bag that they got? That's the vibe of the character. If it's framed as the protagonist trying to be normal and trying to hide her murderous urges, I would get it, but then the way it's shown, the way it's presented, it reads as this is just the character's personality. She's not fighting this murderous urge. She's not trying to fit in with normal society. It just falls flat. It feels very shallow. There's also this sentiment about marriage being anti-feminist. The character says, "I'm a feminist, so I think marriage is just a fancy form of ownership." Feminism at the root of it is about having a choice. It's about having agency. So saying you're a feminist so you think marriage is just some form of ownership, it feels very backward. It feels very ignorant. So after this one, I just did not care what happens to the character afterward. So let's go to the next one, which is To Bargain with Mortals by R.A. Basu. I DNF December 13, 2025. I actually took a while to decide if I actually want to DNF this because it has a very interesting premise. An outcast heiress, a notorious gang leader, a country on the brink of revolution. In the colonized nation of Viriana, Poppy Sutherland lives between cultures. As the brown-skinned adopted daughter of the viceroy, she is both rejected by white high society and alienated from the people of her native land. When she discovers her opportunistic fiancé's plot to exile her, Poppy flees, straight into the clutches of the Jackal. Hassan Dewar, the ruthless criminal known as the Jackal, has long been targeted for his family's divine magic, a gift colonizers have tried to stamp out. When his brother is arrested, he seizes Poppy as leverage, but Poppy has powerful secrets and political ambitions of her own. As allies, they could do more than just free Hassan's brother and keep Poppy safe. They could topple the very power structure that hold them all back. The first book in the Reckoning Storm duology, To Bargain with Mortals, is a stunning reflection on politics and purpose, blood and allegiance, and what we do with the histories we inherit. So obviously, there are very interesting parts here. The main character is a brown-skinned woman who is adopted by a white family, so that has its own tensions in itself. She has to find where she belongs. She's not good enough for the white family, but she's also detached and acts as superior to her own people. This very complicated identity is, I don't think it was handled well in the book. It's very simplistic. Poppy right away starts off as kind of sympathetic to the Virianians. She has a nanny who is full Virianian, and the nanny tells her stories about their gods and their own history and stuff like that. But then Poppy makes a mistake. She mentions the stories to her white adoptive father, and that's taboo. That's not legal. They're not supposed to mention the gods anymore. So Poppy actually gets her nanny fired. Once Poppy gets out of the influence of her white family, like she gets kidnapped, she gets exposed to the Virianian culture, there's no reflection on that. There's no genuine reflection on what she did. There is a flashback, or there is a past mistake that she did that keeps getting repeated. The nanny got fired, they went away. It was a hard life for them, and then the nanny, she has an own daughter, the nanny died, and then the daughter went to Poppy for help. Poppy gave her a necklace, which is an heirloom from the white family, and for some reason, somehow, when the nanny's daughter sold that necklace to the pawn shop, that pawn shop recognized the necklace and reported to the Poppy's adoptive father. The father found out that Poppy, gave the necklace, and nanny's daughter got imprisoned, blah blah blah. So it's such an elaborate chain of events that could have fallen apart because the nanny's daughter, sorry, I forgot the name. When the nanny's daughter sold the necklace, so did she go to a Virianian pawn shop or did she go to a white pawn shop? Because I would assume if I was a colonized brown girl and I got this gold necklace that I need to sell off discreetly, I would go to a pawn shop run by a brown person because that way I know that they won't betray me. I would assume that the nanny's daughter also did that. But then the brown owner of the shop also reported her to the white man, which is, I'm not saying that couldn't happen. I'm just saying that that's an interesting bit because it touches on the influence that the colonizers have on creating a divide within the brown community. That would be interesting, but we don't get that explanation. We only get the summary. Poppy gave the necklace to the nanny's daughter. The nanny's daughter sold it to a pawn shop. The pawn shop reported to the duke. There's no exploration. There's no further explanation on how that happened. That backstory is just used to give Poppy guilt. It's just used for Poppy to feel bad for herself that she made a mistake mistake. She didn't realize that she sent her friend to jail because of this thing that she tried to do for the good. And speaking of, the lore is actually very interesting. Within Virianians, some people have magic, some people don't have magic. And Viriania has a caste system that basically puts the people with magic higher than the people without magic. And the colonizers used that tension between magic users, people without magic, to divide the Virianian community. They inflamed that tension by digging a well. Because for some reason, the Virianians without magic did not think to dig up a well. The way it worked was the water-based magic users would bring up water from the earth and then they would distribute the water. The white colonists created the well and then distributed the water just for free, which is an interesting point. That is a very interesting and very, I think, accurate method of trying to colonize a country, to use that internal struggle and then inflame that and then take advantage of it. But then this specific backstory relies on the fact that the non-magic Virianians didn't know how to dig a well. That's it. The white people gave them wells and then they completely sided with them and caused the Virianian nation to collapse. Kind of like Poppy's internal racism, there's not a lot of deeper exploration. It doesn't explore the nuances between the internal conflict of Viriania and the colonizers inserting themselves. I thought actually that this is YA because of this. It feels very YA, but it's actually tagged as adult fiction. Yeah, for YA, this would definitely get a higher rating, but because it is tagged as adult fiction, I couldn't get into it because of how immature, how juvenile the racism and colonization are tackled. Okay, and then we have Hassan Dawar, who is said to be a ruthless criminal. We don't really see him being ruthless. The first moment that we meet him, he's looking for someone who has a debt and he's about to collect a debt. He threatens violence and bodily harm, but he doesn't do that. What he does is he takes the debtor's sister and has the sister work for him, which is actually helpful for the sister because the sister was being kind of abused by the debtor. And then he burns down the house that has no one in it. So I don't see him being ruthless. You could call him probably morally gray and maybe a criminal. You can call him a criminal, but I don't think the ruthlessness comes through, especially because we get his point of view and we actually see that he tries to mitigate harm and he's actually more lenient than his brothers. So the ruthless criminal is not ruthless criminaling. I actually got far with this one. I DNF'd at 70%, chapter 34. I did, however, have to take a break at the 60% mark and then tried to read up to 70%, but I kept losing interest. I kept putting the book down and then just not reading it. I tried to skim through at least, but Poppy's POV just did not interest me at all. It actually frustrated me because of the previously mentioned lack of character depth and lack of nuance regarding her internalized racism. I wrote a semi-lengthy review for this one because there are things that I liked, but it just did not grab my attention completely. For adult fiction, the writing is too simplistic. It's lacking subtlety because we are told, not shown. Every feeling, every lesson, every message is spelled out. There is no room for the readers to infer anything. There's no room for readers to analyze the characters. We are told every thought, every emotion. We are told what an action means, what the character meant when they said something. We are told everything. Topics on racism, colonialism, and classicism are presented like a textbook or a manifesto, often delivered via long exposition instead of being shown through the world and its characters. Any kind of discrimination, racism that happens through the characters is not integrated well. I don't have the exact quotations here, but there are several times where the characters would actually spell out that racism is bad. Racism is happening to me. They sound like they are reading off a "What is Racism" pamphlet. And again, it's not a bad thing. It's just a very simplistic, very heavy-handed way of talking about, racism and colonialization, which would work on a younger demographic like YA or even middle grade. Yeah, it would work on middle grade as well because it's just very blunt. But for an adult fiction, it's just very hard to read because it's so over the top. It's so hammered and it's repetitive as well. They keep repeating, the same sentiments, so it is very, very frustrating to read about as an adult. There is one scene where Poppy asks to learn about the Virianian culture and Hassan invites this theater group to perform one of the plays that talk about their gods. And while this play is going on, right, they're watching the play, Hassan is right there explaining what the play means. And the narration explains this as well. Like, for example, a character with a moon motif comes in and then Hassan would say, oh yeah, that's the moon goddess, is blah blah blah. There's already a visual medium. There is a play, a stage play with music and dancing, but then we still have Hassan in the narration spell out what the play is trying to say. Like, what are we doing? It's very redundant and frustrating because the narration doesn't trust its readers to understand what is being shown to them. Poppy, as a character, feels flat. Her motivations feel plot-driven instead of character-driven. The plot becomes very convenient for her because it has to go that way. And yeah, like I said, even her proposing to work with Hassan and her goal to become Vicereine was an act of desperation rather than an active choice, making her come off as passive. Poppy is also like, she's 24, right? She's 20-somethings, but she acts like a teenager who doesn't know anything. There are also little contradictions and nonsense that took me out of the story. For example, Hassan's mother says that there has never been a Vicereine. It's always a Viceroy, so it's always a male authority figure. So why is there a term for Vicereine? Why is there a term for something that did not exist before? So the time setting is very confusing. Sometimes it feels 1800s, sometimes it feels 1920s, and then we have terms from 1919 and the 1950s. It's very confusing, which does not create a vivid location. Another world-building issue is the existence of the Virian gods. There are Virian gods, and we are told that the Virian gods work on a sacrifice basis. You sacrifice to the gods to get your magic powered up. That is interesting, but the book doesn't really go into detail about it. But where the world building falls is it doesn't consider the implication of the gods existing. If Virian gods existed, do the white people not have gods? Do other countries in this world not have gods? Or is it just the Virians that have gods? It's not really answered. It's not clear. It doesn't even hint at the global implication of very real gods and magic existing. Why do the white colonists not have magic? I'm not saying that they should have magic as well. I'm just asking, why do some Virianians have magic, some Virianians don't, and it seems like the white colonizers do not have magic at all. So to summarize, I DNF to bargain with mortals because of weak characterizations, incomplete world building, and writing that does not match the adult fiction genre. Otherwise, the plot, the premise is very interesting. So let's go to A Fire in the Sky by Sophie Jordan. I DNF January 1st, 2026. Listen to the audiobook, which is 11 hours and 16 minutes. Dragons are extinct, witches are outcast, magic is dying, but humans' lust for power is immortal. Dragonfire no longer blisters the sky over Pantera, but inside the lavish palace, life is still perilous, especially for Tamsin. Raised in the glittering court alongside the princesses, it's her duty to be punished for her misdeeds. Treated as part of the royal family, but also as the lowliest servant, Tamsin fits nowhere. Her only friend is Stig, captain of the guard, though sometimes she thinks he wants more than friendship. When Fel, the beast of the borderlands, descends on her home, Tamsin's world becomes even more dangerous. To save the pampered princesses from a fate worse than death, she is commanded to don a veil and marry the brutal warrior. She agrees to the deception, even though it means leaving Stig and the only life she's ever known behind. The wedding night begins with unexpected passion and ends in near violence when her trickery is exposed. Rather than start a war, Fel accepts Tamsin as his bride, but can he accept the dark secrets she harbors? Secrets buried so deep even she doesn't know they exist. For Tamsin is more than a royal weeping girl, more than the false wife of a man who now sees her as his enemy. And when those secrets emerge, they will ignite a flame bright enough to burn the entire kingdom to the bone. Magic is not dead, it is only sleeping, and it will take one ordinary girl with an extraordinary destiny to awaken it. Okay, so very interesting premise. We have Tamsin, who is a weeping girl. Basically, if the princesses misbehave, instead of punishing the princesses, they punish Tamsin. She's basically the royal punching bag. Yeah, she is sent to marry this beast of the borderland that they consider as a barbarian. Interesting beginning. It opens up fairly okay. Background for the main character is very interesting. Being a whipping girl, I didn't know that that was a thing. Is that a thing in real life? Let me look. Okay, whipping girl. Okay, it gives a different meaning here. So maybe whipping girl as defined in this book is not existent in real life. I don't know. Maybe it does, but I don't care enough to do more research. I'll just say that Tamsin's background is interesting. It would make for good conflict between her and the princesses, because while she is the only one getting punished, she also has genuine affections for the princesses, especially the youngest princess. So this background gives a lot of opportunity to explore Tamsin's role or Tamsin's place in the world. She's technically not a princess. She's not of the blood. She's just adopted. I don't know if that's explored in the later part of the books, but in the 31% that I did, it's not explored fully. The writing has lines like, "My peaches grew heavy, tingling with sensation, the inner swells vibrating from my labored breaths." The peaches. I scarcely feel his big hands. And I'm not saying peaches as euphemism, like it actually says peaches. And at that point, I just stopped. I just stopped reading. While the start is interesting because we have Tamsin eavesdropping on this political talk, the beast of the borderlands comes in to demand a wife, basically. The king agreed to this marriage and she is worried for the princesses. She doesn't want them to be sold off to this barbarian. And then she gets called in by the crown and by the advisor to be like, actually, we're sending you. You're going to marry this barbarian. You're going to cover your face. You're not going to show him your face until the marriage is consummated so he can't back out. I stop at the part where the marriage is being consummated because it takes so long to get through that marriage. The quote that I read to you, that's what's happening. And this is between two characters who has that enemies to lovers, but also insta-lust dynamic. They snipe at each other, but then they also find each other attractive, and they shouldn't be attracted, but they are. That generic thing, they also do that. So yeah, DNF, 31%. So that's definitely like a writing issue. Alright, so let's go to the next one, The Deathless One by Emma Hamm. I DNF January 2. I read the digital version. So a princess murdered at the altar makes a deal with the god of death for vengeance and to save her people in this first in a unique romantasy trilogy from USA Today's best-selling author Emma Hamm. Jessamine was raised to be a leader of her people, but when the land is overrun in an incurable plague, she must enter a political marriage to save them all. A union that should have brought hope only brings death, as her new husband murders her at the wedding altar and seizes the throne. That itself is very interesting. Getting murdered at the marriage altar, that is juicy. But her death is just the beginning. Her spirit is met by the Deathless One, a god of death yearning to return to the mortal plane, and he needs her help. The two of them make a deal, her life and the return of her kingdom in exchange for his resurrection. But the Deathless One is a known trickster, and a deal with him is one made in blood. Jessamine knows the Deathless One is a dangerous ally, but the longer they work together, the more she wants him and the less she can stay away. As their connection deepens, soon she wonders if she even wants this contract to end. Perhaps the more appealing throne is the one by his side, but she'd have to turn her back on her people to get it. So obviously, there are several interesting bits here, and the hook is really good. Protagonist gets murdered at her marriage altar. Unfortunately, the execution is lacking. There is a lot of illogical plot and character decisions starting from the beginning, like right away. The princess, who is the heir to the throne, like she's the only heir, as the synopsis says, she is raised to be the next in line. She is raised to be a queen. So keep that in mind. So this princess knows magic, which is forbidden. She reads about magic. She has an interest in magic, and that's taboo. But this supposedly politically trained princess admits to her groom that she is dabbling with magic. So at the beginning, we open and Jessamine is reading a book about magic. She's wearing the wedding dress already. And then we go to the ceremony. And in the middle of this, it is heavily implied that the groom, who she knows from childhood, is abusive. Jessamine mentions that she has bruises on her arms, and that's from the groom. Her mom also asks her, like, are you sure you want to do this? She hesitates, but she ultimately says yes. So yeah, there is a heavy implication that the groom hurt her physically already. They're not married yet. So now they are at the altar, right? The groom, I think he's a prince or a king from a different kingdom. He asks Jessamine directly, are you still dabbling with magic? In front of everyone at the altar, this politically trained princess says she can't lie because she doesn't want to start the marriage that way. So she says yes. She admits to doing this taboo thing in front of everyone. And then the groom loudly declares this. So he does this, declaration that this princess is doing something illegal. She's not fit, blah, blah, blah. This is treason. The guards from his country start pouring in and just start killing everyone, including the queen and Jessamine. Okay, first of all, that is a very stupid thing to do for a character that is supposedly trained to inherit a throne. Why would she admit to this person who already physically hurt her that she's doing something illegal? And in front of everyone as well. Why would she think this? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't align with her character as an heir to a throne, an heir to a whole kingdom. And then we also have the terrible pacing. There's no emotional or narrative beat that shifts from bad to worse. Like, They're doing this ceremony, and then Jessamine says, oh yes, I do magic, and then right away blood and gore. Everyone is screaming. So it's like it went from 0 to 100 without registering with Jessamine. It went to 0 to 100 without allowing the emotions to catch up to. I hope that makes sense. This happened and then that happened. Now everyone's dead. The readers and even Jessamine doesn't have time to feel the horror of what is happening. So the pacing is terrible, not allowing emotional beats to exist. The opening and the wedding happen so quickly without establishing why I should care about the characters and what happens to them if they fail, which makes the following scenes feel hollow. We just got introduced to Jessamine. We know that she likes magic. We know that she's probably a bit dumb for admitting to doing some treason. We know that they have a good relationship with their mother, and then everyone dies. Why would I care about them when we only know the basics? This whole everyone dies just feels flat because they are basically strangers. They are just words on a page. I don't see them as characters, as individuals yet. So this whole sequence is just hollow. It's not even shocking because it is mentioned in the synopsis. Characters' actions are not grounded in their environment or personality. They feel inconsistent. Then there are narrative inconsistencies too. Like in one scene in the god's POV, he enters this house and then he is greeted by this witch who says like, who are you? Why are you trespassing? Why are you here? Several sentences later, the witch greets the god by name. Like she actually knows who he is. So like, does she not recognize him, or did she recognize him right away? I don't know which one. So that's that for Deathless One. Did not finish because of character and yeah, just illogical. Alright, the next is The Wolf and the Crown of Blood by Elizabeth May. I listened to the audiobook from Libro FM. I believe that was an arc. Is it out yet? Published 27 January. And I DNF'd January 15. So I listened to the audio arc from Libra FN. A princess and a war-weary god met in the ashes of a broken city, forging sacrifice. Now centuries of fragile peace and on the brink of collapse. Brioni de Valiant was born to die again and again. In Vartana, royal blood is the currency of peace, with every monarch sacrificed and resurrected to appease the gods. But when the rebellion stirs, the god king sends his deadliest weapon to restore order, an immortal assassin known only as the Wolf. Evander has perfected the art of killing over centuries until his latest target becomes the one person he cannot destroy. When forbidden desire burns between the assassin and the sacrificial princess, their connection threatens the fragile boundary between gods and mortals. And when that boundary shatters, empires crumble, because when gods fall in love with mortals, mortals are always the ones to break. So this one is technically a soft DNF. I intend on picking up the digital copy. So this DNF is specifically for the audiobook. I DNF'd at 9%, so around 1 hour 50 minutes. The premise is very interesting. The main character, Brioni, seems like an active character, seems to be proactive in her own story. She has a bit of a rebellious streak. Intriguing premise, and the characters are not bad. They have interesting backstories as well. You know, Brioni being sacrificed all the time, that sounds interesting. So this DNF is only for the audiobook because the narrator for Brioni makes the book very hard to listen to. The delivery for each line doesn't flow well. It is without inflection, without life. It's a very one note. There is no shift, like emotional or tonal, no shift or pause when going from idea to the next. The narration sounds like a giant run-on sentence, and the dialogues are indistinguishable. When we have two characters, having a continuous conversation, I do not know who's saying what. Not only because the dialogue is not personalized, like characters' voices are not reflected in the dialogue, but because the delivery is the same as well. I had to rewind several times in every Brioni POV because it just gets confusing. I don't even notice when a narration turns to an internal thought or when an internal thought becomes a spoken dialogue. I could not differentiate it. It just made the scenes very hard to follow. For the narrator, for Evander, the male main character, is better in terms of characterization and overall delivery. His voice is also appealing. He has that deep, rumbling voice fit for the character. But still, there are a few lines that were difficult to understand because of the sound mixing. Sometimes it goes too soft when there are lines that are spoken in sort of like a whisper. It's very hard to hear, especially with a deep, rumbly voice. So yeah, the sound mixing is not too great. It's still better than Brioni's POV, but it's still difficult to listen to the story. The one thing that I will criticize now about the text itself and not the narrators or the audio quality, there is a lot of F-bombs in the book, which makes listening to it unappealing. I don't mind the cursing, but hearing the narrators say the F-bomb so frequently makes you notice it so much. When you're reading it, it can sort of blend with everything else, but hearing them say it, and they say it with feelings as well. So it really highlights just how many times they use it. And I only listened to 9%, and I'm already tired of hearing the word. And just on a technical side, using the F-bomb so much makes it lose power. It just becomes overused and unnecessary. I don't know when I'll read the text copy, whenever it becomes available on Libby. So we have 3 more to go. The next one is House of the Beast by Michelle Wong. I DNF'd January 17, 2026. Super interesting premise. Born out of wedlock and shunned by society, Alma learned to make her peace with solitude, so long as she had her mother by her side. When her mother becomes gravely ill, Alma discovers a clue about her estranged father and writes a message begging for help. Little does she know that she is a bastard of House Avera, one of the 4 noble families that serve the gods and are imbued with their powers, and her father is a vessel of the dread beast, the most frightening god of all, a harbinger of death. So that's the main draw for me, that they have characters who are vessels for gods. That is very interesting. In a desperate exchange for her mother's medicine, Alma agrees to sacrifice her left arm to the beast. It says Alma agrees, but she actually doesn't agree to it. She agrees to go with her dad, but then when she was about to sacrifice her arm, from what I remember, she didn't agree to that. She didn't know that her arm was going to be cut off and sacrificed to the god. It's not her own volition. Alma agrees to sacrifice her left arm to the beast in a ceremony that will bind her forever to the house and its deity. Regardless, her mother soon passes, leaving Alma trapped inside the Avera's grand estate, despised by her relatives and nothing but a pawn in her father's schemes. Okay, it says her mother soon passes. The way this information was revealed to Alma and the reader is that Alma wanted to visit her mom or something like that, or send a message, but then her dad says that the mom is actually dead. So Alma didn't know until later on that her mother passed away because the dad didn't keep his promise. He didn't send doctors like he said he would. That's weird. There's a bit of inconsistency between the synopsis and what actually happened. Okay. Now, vengeance is the only thing that keeps Alma going, that and the strange connection she has with her god. A monster who is constantly by her side, an eldritch being taking the form of a beautiful prince with starlit hair that only she can see. She tells Alma that she has been chosen to bring change upon their world, and with his help, Alma plots a perilous journey to destroy the house that stole everything from her. A gripping fantasy novel marked by divine rituals, intense combat, and twisted romance, House of the Beast is a tale of revenge, resilience, and the power of love to see through the darkness. So I did not put a reason why I DNF'd. Okay, I don't have notes for this one. I got to the part where the tests are done. Each member of the Avera family does this test, or like a competition, a combat competition, to find out who is gonna go find this fallen star and kill the god, like the fallen star. So the first part shows Alma getting taken from her mother and training, getting her arm cut off. Those are interesting. There's a lot of flashback going on when she was a child. She has this imaginary friend. When her mom knew that she was talking to this imaginary friend, she freaked out and things like that. There's a lot of like flashbacks. I think the setup dragged on too long, and then once we get to Alma as an adult or teens, I don't know actually how old she is, but when we get to the present time, Alma is already a different person because of what she went through as a kid, which doesn't make sense to me, because why would you introduce Alma as a kid, suddenly do a time skip, and then Alma is a different person now? Or why not open up with Alma at present and show her place in the household, like what she does every day, show her training before we get to the combat rituals? Because after the time skip, we see Alma just kind of meditating before the rituals, and then the rituals happen. She also does the combat exam in a dress, like in a gown, which is very funny to me. Like, why why was her wearing a gown necessary? I think it was the time skip that threw me off, because I was already interested with Alma as a child, but then the introduction of this older Alma, she's more cynical, she's more of the tough girl archetype now, and it's such a switch. I don't know. I think because the setup was too long. We did all this setup only to jump forward and have a different version of Alma, so I just lost interest. I don't think there is a lot of issues with the writing. It's just the pacing, I think. Yeah. Alright, so 2 more. So next one is Ordinary Monsters by J.M. Miro. I started with reading the text, the digital version, switched to audiobook, which is 25 hours and 21 minutes. I DNF January 31, 2026. Basically, Ordinary Monsters is set in 1882 Victorian London, and it deals with these children with superpowers. There is like a detective who is gathering them and taking them to this place where they can study and practice using their magic. It is a very interesting concept. It's not the most original, but it is interesting. It feels very X-Men-like, but in 1822? It is 1822? Whatever the year was. I DNF'd at chapter 2, 4%. So it's an hour and 11 minutes into the audiobook. The book opens with a woman fleeing. The woman is being chased by dogs and by men with guns. because she killed a nobleman's son, or a son of a landowner, something like that, because the son SA'd this woman. She fought back and she killed him by accident. She flees. She gets on board this train where she finds a glowing baby next to his dead mother. Very intriguing. There's a lot of mystery going on. There's a lot of tension. It's off on a good start. But then once the character, I forgot her name, once the woman who was running decides to take care of the baby, and once she disembarks wherever city she stops at, the narration quickly becomes a this happened and then that happened type of narration. So the urgency, the tension, the mystery from the opening is gone, replaced by summaries of things that happened throughout 6 years, I think. So it's like, it was this month when this happened, and I found this. When my son was this year old, this happened, and that happened, and I met this person. And then it was when he was 6 years old that this person came for me, and this and that. The tension disappears, the pacing slows down, the characters become passive, because instead of moving through the story, moving through their life, they are just narrating a summary of what they did. And then the POV shift changes to Charlie, who is a 16-year-old black kid who also has powers. He can heal himself. Again, the introduction is very strong because we learn that once people knew that he can heal himself, he gets beaten up, and then they watch him heal, and then he gets beaten up again. And as a black character, that creates an interesting backstory, a chance to comment and talk about, racism at that time. Charlie's POV hints at this anger that he has. It seems like Charlie is also aware of his situation of being a supernatural black kid. I got more interested in the book and continuing the book when Charlie's POV came in. But then the POV switched again to a detective. With each POV switch, the tension resets to the beginning. POV 1, we have the woman, high tension, great, the tension is here, but then we do that time skip, it kind of goes down. And then when Charlie's POV came in, the tension is here because he's like chained to something, and then, he's not in a good place. So the tension is high, it keeps at this level, sort of. It's interesting. There's tension, there's mystery, there's intrigue. And then we switch to a POV, and then it goes like this, because we are now introducing a different character, and there's not a lot of action in that introduction. The narration rambles about her backstory, who she is, and what she's doing, and it's just like rambling info dump. The interest, the tension, the intrigue, it remains at this level, and I quickly lost interest after that. Overall, the tone is flat, the narration is flat, it gets flowery without really giving anything to character development or setting development, world building. The rambling makes it lose tension in places where there should have been tension because of the overriding so many things being described 3 times. The pace just drags on, and I start losing the plot and losing interest. And I'm actually surprised that I only got to chapter 2 because it feels like I've read more than that already. It doesn't feel like just 2 chapters. And the last one, Uprooted by Naomi Novak, DNF'd February 3, so a couple of days ago. Okay, Uprooted is about this village girl, Agnieszka, and the dragon that is not a dragon. So Agnieszka lives in a village where there is a wizard living in a tower. The wizard is called the dragon for whatever reason. The dragon takes a village girl every 10 years for mysterious reasons. The villagers don't know what he's doing with the women, but a lot of them assume that he is forcing himself on them. What they know is the women, after the 10 years is up, they come back changed. They don't want to stay in the small village anymore. They go traveling and they go to university and stuff like that. So it's not really like a dreadful outcome. So I read Uprooted because I liked Spinning Silver, which is from the same author. Spinning Silver, it has its own flaws, but overall I did enjoy the story, so I gave it a 5-star. But the writing flaws that I found in Spinning Silver is more evident here in Uprooted, and it just made Uprooted unreadable in a way, or unfinishable maybe, or unreadable as well, because it actually took me a while. I keep putting it down and then picking it up again, and every time I pick it up I felt like, I wish this is over already. Let me just see. So Uprooted was published May 19, 2015, and Spinning Silver, July 10, 2018. Okay, that makes sense. That's 3 years between them. Okay, that's good news, because it means that the author improved. It's not the other way around. Okay, that's good. So I DNF'd Uprooted at 33% because this story just dragged on. There is no change. There is no tension. Characters roughly stayed the same, and I don't know where the plot is going. Interesting premise, but I just had trouble with the writing. So much trouble. I don't think it's good. I was surprised when I read this because the writing is unbearable. Sorry to be dramatic, but yeah, the writing is unbearable compared to Spinning Silver. And like I said, I did have issues with the writing in Spinning Silver as well, but they're easier to overcome because the plot was engaging, the characters were interesting, and the multiple POVs help with maintaining tension. So whenever one POV drops, another POV jumps in and then keeps the tension up. And it's like a wave, a continuous wave. In Uprooted, it's only single POV. We're stuck in Agnieszka's head, unfortunately, and Agnieszka is stuck in a tower. So we're double stuck in one location. The writing just drags on and on. The pacing just drags on and on. Let's just go through with it. Basically, what made me finally give up with the book is the telling. There's so much telling rather than showing. At a crucial point where Agnieszka has a best friend, Kasia. Agnieszka and the village all expected the dragon to pick Kasia as the next girl to be taken to the tower because Kasia is the most beautiful, she's the most perfect, she's the most talented. She's just the best of the best. The dragon intended to pick Kasia at first, but he does a double take and ends up picking Agnieszka because Agnieszka somehow has magic. It's not explained. In the 33% that I've read, it's not explained how she has magic. She just has it. The dragon notices this and he says that it's the law that anyone who has magic needs to be taught magic. Except the book doesn't really explain, it doesn't really say, it doesn't even hint at how a person can have magic. We have several villages close to the woods, like the magic forest, and only one wizard there. So how do humans get magic? Presumably Agnieszka was born with it. That's the implication. It says that's the reason why she's like dirty all the time, because of magic. Are mages born then? Are wizards born? How many wizards are born? Because it seems like there's only one wizard in this location with several villages, and then Agnieszka, so that's two of them. So who gets magic? How is magic distributed? What kinds of magic are there? Because the dragons and Agnieszka's magic are different. They work differently. It's not explained in the book. It just says, my magic feels different than whatever you're doing. Agnieszka's magic is more intuitive. It's more about feelings, while the dragon's magic is more like systematic. So for me, as someone who has been reading fantasy since I was a teenager and someone who is sort of familiar with the magic classes of like Baldur's Gate 3, I would assume that Agnieszka is a sorcerer, like she's born with magic, and the dragon is a wizard. The wizard is a wizard, as in he learns or he performs magic through learning. I would assume that. But if someone is not familiar with that kind of magic classes, then what would they think about this? Like, because it's not explained. It just says, oh, my magic is different for yours. Move on. What was I saying with this? Where was I going with this? Yeah, so the world building. If you don't look at it too closely, the world building sort of makes sense, but maybe that's because I'm just filling the holes with whatever knowledge I have from other fantasy series, other fantasy books. But maybe if you don't have that background, then maybe there's a lot of holes in the world building. This also happens in Spinning Silver, where Miriam's magic is not really acknowledged. Like, Miriam doesn't acknowledge she can do magic now. They just move on. So same thing kind of happens here. Agnieszka has magic now, and she's like, oh, what is the dragon doing to me? But then she finds out she has the magic. It's her magic. And then she just moves on and then does magic really, really well. It's just illogical sometimes. Anyway, my main gripe about Uprooted is that at one point, after several months of training with the dragon, Agnieszka learns that Kasia got taken to the woods, so she goes and rescues her very easily. She just leaves the tower casually, walks through the woods. It's a bit creepy, but ultimately she doesn't find any obstacles, and then she finds Kasia right away. She does some intuitive magic. She like shakes the earth and threatens to tear down the woods until the woods released Kasia. Because Kasia was bonded to the tree, kind of like in Pirates of the Caribbean when Will Turner's dad got absorbed into the ship. Kind of like that, but it's Kasia and the tree. Agnieszka is able to get Kasia out, and then she takes her to the tower. But Kasia is infected with the woods. She has worms inside her or something like that, and Agnieszka is intent on purifying Kasia. So she and the dragon does this magic, and this magic, one of the effects is that Kasia, Agnieszka, and the dragon are temporarily connected telepathically. I'm just gonna read the passage. Two passages from different pages. So this is Agnieszka talking. I saw my own face reflected in her wide glassy eyes, and my own secret jealousies. How I had wanted all her gifts, if not the price she would have to pay for them. Tears crept into my eyes. It felt like Wensa haranguing me all over again, and this time there was no escape. Wensa is Cassia's mother, by the way. All the times I'd felt like nothing, the girl who didn't matter, that no lord would ever want. All the time I'd felt myself a gangly, tangled mess beside her. All the ways she'd been treated specially. A place set aside for her, gifts and attention lavished, everyone taking the chance to love her while they could. There had been times I had wanted to be the special one, the one everyone knew would be chosen. Not for long, not very long, but now that seemed like cowardice. I'd enjoyed a dream of being special and nursed a secret seed of envy against her, though I'd had the luxury of putting it aside whenever I chose. And then several pages later, they're still doing the magic. I had to see her, bare before me, and that hurt even worse, because she'd hated me too. She'd hated me for being safe, for being loved. My mother hadn't sent me to climb 2 tall trees. My mother hadn't forced me to go 3 hours walk every day back and forth to the hot sticky bakery in the next town to learn how to cook for our Lord. My mother hadn't turned her back to me when I'd cried and told me I had to be brave. My mother hadn't brushed my hair 300 strokes a night, keeping me beautiful, as though she wanted me taken, as though she wanted a daughter who would go to the city and become rich and send back money to her brothers and sisters, the one she let herself love. Oh, I hadn't even imagined the secret bitterness as sour as spoiled milk. And then she'd even hated me for being taken. She hasn't been chosen after all. That is a lot of just spelling out the complex and nuanced emotions of these two characters who are best friends. They love each other, but they also have secret resentment, and it's just told here just like that. We don't see any of Agnieszka's resentment and jealousy towards Cassia, because when the book opens, the dragon was about to come again, like it's in a few days or something like that. Agnieszka spends that time telling us that she hates the dragon for taking Cassia, that, you know, the village knows that it's always going to be Cassia. Cassia is prepared. Secretly, my mom was happy that it was not me. There's no establishing of this secret resentment about her beauty. There's no hint of Agnieszka wanting to be the special one. There's nothing about that. For here to suddenly be like, she saw my secret resentment. Since when were you resentful about Cassia? To have it here, it's all telling. There's no subtext. It's just dropped on you in this very, very long repeated passage. 2, it's not believable. We didn't see any of that. It's just out of the blue. 3, not only does Agnieszka not only does Agnieszka lay out her emotions and complexity just like that, she also jumps into Cassia's POV. So it's not even Cassia who gets to reveal her emotions. It's just Agnieszka looking at the deepest, parts of Cassia and telling us what she saw, which is very bland. It's very boring, and it's very frustrating to read about, because this is a very interesting dynamic. We could have had moments with them trying to sort this out on page, and it could have been so interesting to read about them navigating their emotions, maintaining that friendship while also having the resentment kind of build up. That would have been so interesting. But now that it's just all there in page, I'm only at 33% and everything is just revealed, and I don't know where the plot is going, so I'm not even interested, so I just stopped. Okay, what else? What else didn't work? There is a lot that didn't work. Flat characters, Agnieszka and the dragon act and react depending on the plot instead of their personalities, if they even have one. The dragon doesn't seem to have a personality outside of being the wizard, and Agnieszka is just like, at first, she was like, oh, I don't want to be in this tower. And then she's like, oh, I can't do anything to escape this tower. But then she escapes the tower to save her village, and then she goes back to the tower and does everything again. It's just a cycle with her. It gets repetitive and boring. There's no balance with the narration, action, and dialogue. Most of the book is Agnieszka's internal narration, but the narration is filled with adverbs, adjectives, and repetition. The sentence can run on, interrupt itself to drop irrelevant information, and generally can get too long without saying much. Like, I read that one passage, and it's super long, but it only says the same thing. And again, we could have had that shown to us instead of exposition. This very long sentence structure, like the repetition and stuff, there is even a part where 2 colons were used in one sentence, which is just wrong. The other ones you took, I said, without thinking any of it, colon. I was too worried for Cassia, colon. What could she do? She wasn't a witch, semicolon. At least people understood what that was. She was simply changed dreadfully, and I didn't think she could conceal it. The narration likes to use colons and semicolons a lot, and sometimes it's not even correctly used. Dialogue tags often have adverbs, like dreadfully, terribly, horribly, and sometimes helplessly. In chapter 8, inexpressibly is used 3 times in one scene. There's just a lot of reliance on adverbs and adjectives to express emotion instead of showing the emotion through body language or even just the diction of the characters. Go home, the dragon said. Marry a farmer if she can find one who won't mind his wife is made of wood. She's still flesh. She's not made of wood, I said, protesting. You don't have to say protesting. You already know from context that she is contradicting what the dragon is saying. So on the review that I made on Goodreads and Storygraph, I copy-pasted some quotes from the book. So if you're interested in looking at all the examples of all the, the showing, not telling, and stuff like that, it's all in the review. If you could check that out. My Storygraph and Goodreads account profiles are linked in my bio. Alright, so those are the DNF'd books that I recorded. If you've noticed, there are some books here that I did not finish because it failed to hook me. And that's different from the books that I just removed because I wasn't interested. Because the issue is not getting me interested. The issue was keeping my interest. So to me, those are two different things. From all that, I think most of my DNFs are because of some issues I found with the technical aspects of writing. There are a few that didn't get my attention, but I would argue that that's also part of the technical aspect of writing, because in the end, books are creative, books are for fun, but it is also a product. Publishers publish books to get profit. They're not really printing it for free, so it is a commercial product. That plays a part in reviewing. I review those books. I leave ratings and reviews because it's saying that the synopsis is interesting enough, but the execution is not enough for me to actually buy this book. That's how I meant it if I say it didn't hook me. But there's also a writing aspect to that, because as an author, it is your job to keep your readers engaged. From the first sentence of your book, you have to hook your readers. You have to keep them wanting to turn the next page. That's your goal as a writer. And not just saying the specific writers, but writers as a general. If you wrote a book and you publish it, you have people buying it, and then the readers are not interested in reading until the end, to me that is a writing flaw. Because it is a writer's responsibility to tell an engaging story. It is the writer's responsibility to present whatever story they're telling. But that's a storytelling craft. But of course, rating and reviewing DNFs also have proper procedures or etiquette, maybe. Like if you're giving a 1-star to a DNF, then I think the least you could do is explain why. Sometimes you're just not interested in a book, or sometimes it's just not for you. That's a common review in Goodreads, like with 1 star. It's just, oh, this book is not for me. I tried fantasy, but fantasy is not for me, and then they give a 1 star. To me, there's a balance. On one hand, it doesn't seem fair to judge a book that you did not finish, but at the same time, there are also technical reasons that makes a reader not want to finish a book, or makes it impossible to finish a book. And I think it's also valid to rate the book depending on that, because again, books are products. You pay money for them. They are a source of profit for publishers. So I think it's valid to say you're not able to finish a book. Sorry, I wasn't being clear here, but what I wanted to say was that because books are products and publishers are making profit off of them, you are valid to make a review if you want to say that this book is not of the quality that I want, or for whatever reason you wanted to DNF. I think it's valid to say that this product is not up to your standards. And if there are other readers that trust your judgment, then maybe that would help them think about if this product is also up to their standard. I don't know if publishers look at Goodreads or whatever, but I think it would help to just express why a product is not working for you, and that could help other readers and maybe the publishers as well. Who knows? I'm not policing anyone on how to leave reviews and stuff like that. I'm just giving my opinion on how I feel about reviewing and rating DNFs. That's it for this video. That's the DNFs list. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope some of the things I said make sense. Yeah, I'll see you next time. Bye.